Chapter 6. House fire in progress, 2545 Arthur Street. The voice cracked over the speaker above the break room table Tuesday night as the alarms sprang to life, and instantly Jeff was on his feet. The whirlwind banked into high gear around him as people scrambled for the trucks. In the next blink, 6 of them were crammed into one, pulling on gear and equipment as they wailed their way to Arthur Street. The insides of Jeff's stomach flitted in no definite pattern as he pulled on his air tank. This was it, the one he had worked for, trained for, wanted to do, and suddenly the moment was upon him. Only the streetlights lit the night surrounding them as they sped to their destination, where in rapid succession they jumped out. Flames illuminated the night sky, jumping out of the second story of the house and reaching for the roof of the house 10 feet over. "Teague and Jackson, cut the utilities," Captain Rainier, the B-shift crew chief, said as the truck slid to a stop. "Jameson, you and Taylor get the vent holes cut." When his feet hit the street, Jeff grabbed the extension ladder and started for the house. In seconds, Zach Jameson was there, climbing up with a roof ladder and chainsaw in hand. As soon as the saw was whirring, Jeff turned back for the truck, feeding one of the cotton hoses from the top of the truck down to Jackson, who had just returned. The training kicked in. His hands just worked, pulling the hose as it fed off the truck. At that moment, a frantic lady dressed only in a thin, flowery robe ran smack into the chaos and right up to Jeff's side. "Caleb, did they get Caleb out?" she asked, pulling on the edge of Jeff's coat as he fought to extract the last of the hose from the truck. When he turned, those eyes seemed terribly familiar. Fear. Utter, inconsolable terror. "Who's Caleb?" he asked, even as he worked. The hose hit the end. "That's it." "He's the little boy. He's 8. He's about so high with red hair and freckles." "Where was he supposed to be?" Jeff asked, trying to pay attention to everything at once. "He was staying home tonight, by himself while his mom and dad went out. They asked me to watch him. I didn't know anything until I heard the—" "Captain, we've got a problem," Jeff said, striding right up to where Gabe and the captain were strategizing where to go from here. Rainier looked up. "What's that?" "There might be a kid inside." "Might be?" "I didn't know. He said he was going to bed," the lady said as hysteria invaded her body and soul. "Where's his room?" Rainier asked. "It's on the first floor in the back," the lady said. "He just called me 30 minutes ago and everything was fine." Jeff looked at the captain, who yelled to 2 other firefighters running by. When they ran up, the captain briefed them and broke them into 2 groups. Gabe and Jeff would go around back. The other 2 would go in the front. 6 words of final instructions before Jeff ran to the truck, where he grabbed the pry bar as Gabe pulled off an axe. The 2 of them raced down the darkened side of the house. At the gate, Gabe stopped, rattling the whole fence in his frantic attempt to get in. "It's locked." "Great." Jeff's brain sped ahead of him like a race car. "Here." He dumped the metal at Gabe's feet, jumped onto the house's cooling system, which stood by the gate. 2 short motions and he was over. "Pitch me the stuff." The equipment landed on the other side of the fence in a non-discernible pattern, and his hands moved in rapid succession, retrieving all of it just as Gabe joined him on that side of the fence. They ran for the house, and at the first window Jeff pounded on the glass. "Hey, anybody in there? Caleb, anybody?" The only answer was the popping of the flames high above them. At that moment, he heard the crash and ran to where Gabe had just hacked through the plate glass back door. He reached in as the smoke poured out of the gaping hole. 1 click, and they were in. The glass crunched under his boot as Jeff stepped through the opening, and the middle of his heart slammed into his chest. Caleb, a scared little 8-year-old kid in a 2-story maze that he had no map for. Where was that little boy? Jeff pulled on his air mask as the smoke enveloped him. It was blinding, and he bumped into a dining room chair which sent him crashing into the wall. There were so many places a little kid could be. Feeling his way through the darkness, lit only by the pathetic flashlight he swung this way and that, Jeff slid down the wall until it suddenly broke into a hallway, and he turned into the opening. "Caleb? Caleb, buddy, where are you?" nothing was quiet. Voices, water, fire, sirens, windows shattering from the heat, trying to find its way out. Then he saw what looked like a white cloth heaped next to the wall. "I found him!" he called to anyone who could hear anything in the melee. Gently, he picked up the little body, which felt like it weighed nothing at all. He met Gabe coming from the other direction, and they hit the opening together. "Get out! Get out!" Gabe yelled, as if Jeff had any intention of hanging around for the rest of the show. Snaps and a crack. The fire was eating the second floor away right above them. It wasn't really running so much as just stepping cautiously as he fought through the smoke to find his way back out into the cool night. "It's this way." Gabe grabbed his elbow and dragged him back into the dining room. "Hurry!" Crunch went the glass under his boot as Jeff became part of the smoke pouring out into the backyard. The streetlight beam gave him the first real look at what felt like a rag doll in his arms. Barely 8, the freckles stood out in stark contrast to the pale face. "Oh God, please." A wail not wholly like a fire truck sliced through the night. "Let's get him out front," Gabe said at the gate, which gave way with the first axe hit on the metal. Jeff's legs were hurrying through the darkness, but he didn't really feel anything as they broke past the trees on the edge of the house and into the swirl of lights flashing across the houses, making them look like a fun house gone mad. In a blink, he saw the EMTs rushing up the grass. "Over here!" he called, skidding to a stop on the grass and laying the little, limp body in front of him. "We've got it." One of the EMTs pushed him away, and Jeff backed up enough to let the team take the lead. "Hey, you okay?" Gabe asked with a clap on his back. He coughed twice. "Yeah." "He's breathing," one of the paramedics said as they all jumped into motion. It was only when the youngest one stood to get the stretcher from the ambulance that Jeff recognized him. That flash, and then he was gone. "Teague! Taylor!" the captain yelled. "We need you guys ready to go in." A small look back, and Jeff turned. There was more work to be done. The clock in the locker room read 4:15 when he stumbled back in, his fellow firefighters surrounding him, sooty and grime-covered. They all looked like they had just come home from an all-nighter in hell. "I hope the kid's going to be okay," Gabe said, pulling off his boots slowly as the sound of the showers hazed out the comment. "Yeah." Jeff reached into his locker for the little gold cross. He needed it right now. Pulling its strength into his soul, he ran a hand over it and then yanked it on over his head. They weren't supposed to wear things like that at work, but he needed something. "You did good out there, Taylor," Gabe said as Jeff stood on his way to the showers. "Just doing my job." "Well, I'd be happy to help you do it any day of the week." With a smile, Jeff reached out and caught Gabe's hand on the way forward. "Watch what you wish for." Lisa noticed the picture of the gutted house on the front page of the Chronicle the next morning, and her interest riveted to the story. Midnight on a Tuesday. Sunday flitted through her mind, but after that... Her hand flipped through the paper, but there was nothing about him. Not that she really expected there to be. It was crazy to even think about him, but the center of her heart hoped fervently that he was at home in bed when that one happened. Of course, she knew even if he was, he wouldn't be forever. Eventually, the law of averages would put him in one of those burning buildings. Eventually. She folded the paper and laid it to the side. Work was what was important now. Work. Jeff and all the other guys in the world would have to take care of themselves. She certainly didn't need to be wasting valuable energy stores on keeping up with them. 10-1, the Celtics make it to the finals, Dante said from the top of the truck as Jeff worked below, restocking the first aid kits on Thursday. "You and the Celtics," Hunter said as a road cone from the top of the truck landed on the concrete behind Jeff. "Why don't you get a real team?" "Like who? The awesome Nets?" Dante walked past Jeff to the truck door. "Please, they can't even spell basketball, much less play it." "Oh, yeah, like the Celtics all have PhDs," Hunter shot back as another road cone hit the ground behind Jeff. "Hey, Would you quit throwing those down? Dante yelled. You're going to break something important. Like what? Hunter asked. My head, for one, Jeff said, looking up at the man standing far above him like a supernatural cowboy. No, Dante ducked back out of the truck. I said important. Jeff shook his head and buried it in the first aid compartment. Why did he even try? Lisa? The voice said at her doorway as she sat in her office Friday evening, clicking through the internet looking for a good picture of a zebra that they could use. She looked up and came to immediate attention. Tucker? Yeah, sorry to disturb you. He opened the door wider and stepped in. Sherry said it was okay. Oh, Lisa fought to rebalance her world. Come in, have a seat. Her hands went to work straightening her desk. Sherry knew better, but Lisa also knew her secretary had a huge crush on Tucker and his all-American blonde good looks. One little please, and Sherry would have dove off a cliff for him. What can I do for you? I brought over this list of venues. Tucker held them up after he sat down. Grandpa thought we'd better get something booked before all the space is gone. Oh, okay. She reached for them. Let me see. However, he pulled them back. What do you say we do this over some dinner? It's almost 6, and you have to eat anyway. Dinner? I'm kind of busy right now. She glanced at the zebra on her screen and wished she could join him in that nice green grass. Can't we just go over them here? I made reservations at La Tour d'Argent. D'Argent? Over on the bayou? She asked, sensing a trap. Why would you do that? Because you have to eat, and I have to eat, and we can talk while we eat. He looked at his watch, and all Lisa could think was that she would really like to break that perfectly straight nose of his. We've got to get, though, or we're going to be late. Late? How about never? Pushing all the protests of her rational side down, she stood. Let's get this over with so I can get back to work. Quickly, she grabbed her purse and made sure her money was in it. When she got to the door, she felt his hand guide her through it, and every fiber in her body wanted to smack it away. Sherry, I'm going to take off. Lisa readjusted her purse on her shoulder, and she didn't miss the dreamy look her secretary wafted over the two of them. Just lay the calls I need to return on my desk. Sure, boss, no problem. And that dreamy gaze followed them right out the door. At the elevator, Tucker reached past her and pushed the button. They stepped on, and he pushed too. My car's on the 3rd, she said, and when he didn't reach for the button, she did, but he stopped her hand with his. Let's just take mine, he said, and she hated that tone. That way we can talk on the way. And get this over faster? That would be a blessing. Wishing it wasn't so hard to ignore the slithery way his gaze slid down across her, she stepped out into the parking garage. The 2nd level. It was where she used to park until she hadn't been able to find a space that one day. Now, when she pulled into the garage, she told herself that parking on the 3rd gave her a reason to take the stairs, which had to qualify for some exercise. However, the real reason was always right there in the shadows of her heart. They stopped at the new 2-tone beige Lexus, and Tucker opened her door first. Smoothly, he took her hand as she folded onto the leather seats. As soon as she was in, she pulled her hand from the fingers that felt like they had been soaked in butter for 2 solid decades. When he shut the door, she sat back, pulling herself straight up as she did. Professional. Keep this professional, and he won't get any ideas. Quickly, she grabbed the seatbelt and wrapped it around herself. One more barrier, one more line of defense. His smile brought out the alarms in her spirit when he got in on the other side. He backed out, squealed the tires once, and they were off. The whole ride, Lisa kept her gaze trained out the window and her hands wrapped around the edge of her purse. When he turned on the stereo to slow, hold-me-tight music, she tapped her fingers over the purse, trying to make time run just a little faster. At the restaurant, Tucker let the attendant park the car. They were 3 steps up to the restaurant when Lisa noticed he had no notes in his hands. I thought we were going to talk business. He looked at her and smiled in that infuriating way that said she really should stop thinking so much and just let him lead. "We'll talk business later." "Then what are we going to talk about now?" But she didn't have time to ask that question as Tucker was already conversing with the maitre d'. Lisa clutched her purse tighter. Why was it that no matter what she said, guys just wouldn't take a hint? "Right this way," the maitre d' said, leading them up a short set of stairs to a table at the far end of the restaurant overlooking the shimmering blue water of the Gulf beyond. "Perfect," Tucker said, and Lisa saw the bills pass from one hand to the other. Purposefully, she sat down, grabbed the menu, and perused it. The only thought going through her head was that this one dinner might bankrupt her entire company. A moment more, and Tucker joined her. "I'm surprised you didn't have plans." "Plans?" she asked. "I was working, if that's what you mean." "No, I mean plans, with friends or something." "I had enough fun last week to last me a while," she said sourly. "The shrimp looks good." He wasn't even looking at his menu. Instead, he looked like he was trying out for some modeling job for Oscar de la Renta. That suit just screamed, "Do you know how much money I have?" It annoyed her to the nth degree. "I'm sure glad Grandpa decided to go with your little firm. I just knew this was going to work out so well. In fact, I've been trying to talk the old man into letting me run with this. Well, with your help, of course." That's nice," she said, barely listening. "I wonder if the swordfish is fresh." "I was really excited about it until he came up with this ridiculous public servant angle. I mean, what can the kids learn from the blue-collar set about leadership? It's almost laughable." Lisa's gaze jumped to his as a serrated remark crossed her mind. However, the waiter picked that moment to approach their table. They ordered, and Lisa seriously considered grabbing onto the guy's leg and begging him not to leave them alone. However, she discounted that plan because something said that might invite more trouble than it would thwart. "It's such a beautiful evening," Tucker said, gazing out across the Gulf as he took a small sip of water. Then he turned liquid eyes on her. "Almost as beautiful as you are." "Well, that's original. So we were going to go over the venues?" He brushed that idea away with a swipe. "Maybe later. How about we just get to know each other a little better?" She started to protest, but he didn't give her a chance. "I bet you didn't know I graduated from Yale," he said, taking the words right out of her mouth. "Second in my class. Did my grandfather mention that?" No, I don't think so." The waiter returned with 2 glasses of wine, and as Lisa looked at it, she wondered how fast she would have to drink 1 glass of wine to make her drunk enough to get through a nightmare like this one. "Yeah," Tucker continued without even acknowledging the waiter. "And at the rate I'm going, I'll probably take over Cordell Enterprises by the time I'm 30. "How nice for you," she said, taking another drink. "I had offers lined up at the door when I graduated," Tucker said. "But I said, no, I want to stay with a family business. Loyalty, People see that, and they know I've got things figured out." With one solid knock, Lisa's head started pounding. What she wouldn't have given for a loud, chaotic club where conversation was futile, and what she wouldn't give to have the guts to just stand up, call herself a cab, and tell Cordell Enterprises and Tucker himself to go jump off the highest cliff they could find. Instead, she forced a smile, telling herself that if it just got no worse than this, she could deal with it. When Jeff unlocked his door on Friday evening, he set the 2 bags of groceries on the little table. His fingers reached into his pocket and pulled out the little card that had spent the last week there. Slowly, he turned it over as he slipped the coat off his shoulders. Calling her was crazy. How many ways could a person say, "I am not interested, leave me alone"? However, as clear as that was to his head, his heart just wasn't getting the message. Somehow, he had hoped she would show up yesterday. Why, he didn't know. It was just that now she and Thursday were somehow intertwined in his head. Nonetheless, she hadn't, and so here he was. He picked up the phone, held it for a moment, and then dialed his second choice. Maybe if he just talked to somebody who had some sanity left, that would help him forget about her. In a heap, he slumped onto the bar stool next to the wall. "Dustin, hey man." "Jeffrey, long time no speak. What's up?" "Not much," Jeff said as his fingers turned the card over. "How's work?" "Big station, lots of names, great fun. You?" "About the same." Jeff leaned back against the corner of the wall. "How's Eve?" "Burning supper, again," Dustin said with a laugh. "Hey," the voice in the background protested. "I heard that." "It's okay. I didn't marry her for her cooking skills," Dustin said, and Jeff heard her muffled voice. A twang jumped into his heart as the card flipped over his fingers and onto the counter. "No, she's cool, but she wants to know if you ever got up the guts to go over to Travis." Air failed. No words would come. "Hey, Jeff, you still there?" Dustin asked after a moment. "Yeah, I'm here." "So, did you go?" "No. Well, not exactly, but we kind of bumped into each other the other day." "Fate. Cool. Tell me more." "Not much to tell. She gave me her card." "And you called her?" "Well, no." "Jeffrey, bud, this bumping into each other thing is cool and all, but you're going to miss this train if you don't get it in gear." He got the number. Okay, a number. Why wasn't that enough? "I just don't want her to think I'm like..." "Interested? You are interested. So what's the problem?" "I don't know." His head hit the wall behind him 3 times. "Just call her," Dustin said gently. "I'm sure she'll be happy to hear from you unless she's completely dense. Call her." Jeff finally sighed and looked down at the little card. "Okay, I'll call her." Putting her hand on the table was a mistake. Lisa had gotten that message loud and clear. It was like Tucker's buttery hand was a magnet for the top of hers. She had pulled hers back so many times by the time the entrees arrived, she thought she might get a repetitive motion injury. "And Dad just thinks this is such a wonderful opportunity." Tucker droned on until Lisa's brain had to find something else to think about, lest she go insane. "I do too, of course. I mean, who wouldn't? Great company, fabulous pay." The gold cross shining against the black backdrop of muscles and t-shirt floated through her mind, followed in the next heartbeat by that denim and suede jacket. It was so low-key, and yet so completely breathtaking. To be honest, she wasn't sure if it was the jacket or the layers underneath that intrigued her so much. That arm exuding strength caught her attention, and she wondered how many hours someone would have to spend in the gym to get arms like that. "So, how about it?" Tucker asked when the dessert dishes were cleared. "Lisa?" "Oh, yeah." She shook the dream away from her. "Okay." It was a good cover until she saw the Colgate smile that was in front of her rather than the lopsided one in her memories. "Great, then let's go," Tucker said as he took her hand to help her out of the chair. "Go? Where?" the middle of her being asked, just as a layer down, something said, "Never let them take you to the second crime scene." She was really going to have to lay off the wine and those deadly fantasies. "Hi, Lisa," Jeff said, praying his voice would make it through this message. Leaving a message for her at work? Not a good idea, and yet he had made it this far. He wasn't going to turn back now. This is Jeff, from the fire station. I thought you might still be at work, but I guess not. Well, I just wanted to call and say hi and ask how your week went, but, if you get this sometime, my number is 555-8696. You can call any time. I guess take care, and maybe I'll try to catch you some other time. Bye." His hand hung up the phone, and he collapsed headfirst into the couch. That had to be the worst phone message in the whole history of phone messages. Pushing himself up from the couch, he walked to the back of the apartment to the weight bench sitting in his bedroom. Yanking one barbell laden with weights up from its perch, he sat down on the bench and curved his arm to pull the barbell to him once, twice, 3 times. She wouldn't call back, that much was for sure. 4, 5, 6, and why would she? He wouldn't. 10, 11, 12. In fits, his brain showed him pictures that he really didn't want to see. 14, 15, 16. Why did her smile have to make the top of his chest feel like it might explode at any moment? 20, 21, 22. One look should have told him he didn't have a chance with her. She was beautiful, gorgeous, the kind of girl who walks into a room and heads turn. Not like him. No, when he walked into a room, no one even noticed. 45, 46, 47. Not that he cared whether they noticed or not. It wasn't them he wanted to notice anyway. Just one of them, and he would be happy. At 75, he switched hands. Dustin could do this. Lisa would have fallen into his arms in a heartbeat. Craig could have made it work. At least he would have gotten more than her work number. 38, 39. And Ramsey would have already forgotten her name by now. He didn't want to be like that. Just a tenth of that. Yeah, a tenth would be good. 67, 68, 69. But no, he had to be Jeff. Good old holding the table down Jeff. He put the weight down as he laughed sarcastically at that thought. Curling his toes under the bar at the opposite side of the bench, he let his back lay off of the support, down, down, until the middle of his stomach screamed for mercy. Defiantly, he pulled forward. Lisa was a nice dream, but she wasn't destined for him. He let himself slowly back down. No, she was destined for somebody who knew the difference in years and makes of wine. He pulled up. And how many forks are supposed to go on a table, and which one to use with what? His body arched down. And the proper attire to wear for a Sunday luncheon with the mayor. Up. He had no chance with her. Down. And the sooner he got that through his head to his heart, the better. This wasn't what I had in mind, Lisa said when Tucker's car turned up the street to the bar Houston. I'm really not into dancing. Just a little. Tucker put his hand a 1/4 inch from where hers laid on her lap, to take the edge off. But I need to... Shh. He laid a finger to her lips, and what she really wanted to do was bite it off. I've got a friend who works here. He said he could get us in, no problem. Funny, she thought as she slumped back into her seat. He had told everyone about what he obviously thought was a date, except the one person on it with him. Had it not been for Burke and the account, she would have jumped out of the car, moving or not. When they pulled up to the club, alarm bells jangled through her spirit. Before he could get around the car, Lisa opened her door and stood. She might not have much choice, but the last thing she was going to do was give him an inch of a chance to think this was going anywhere. At the door, Tucker made a production of summoning his friend, who indeed let them right in. Her brain searched frantically for some way out. However, it kept running right into Burke. At a booth, Tucker stopped. How about here? Anything but a booth, she thought tiredly, but she shrugged and slid in anyway. It took only seconds to realize what a huge mistake that was when Tucker arched one arm across the back of the booth while the other searched in the darkness under the table for her hand. You know, she said in panicked retreat, I've got to visit the ladies' room. She slid out the other side and fled for the back before he had a chance to protest. Once there, a plan formulated in her head, and she checked her watch. 10:30. Terrific. Carefully, she sat down by a wall and pulled out her cell phone. Of course, there was no one to call, but the other restroom occupants didn't have to know that. Hi, yeah, we just got here. Are you guys coming? Soup. Jeff was too depressed to eat anything else. He had already checked the machine 6 times, and still nothing. Just like he knew there would be, infinitely. The night was one long, exhausting merry-go-round of trips to the bathroom and fighting Tucker off when he tried to dance with her. Hands. He was all hands. They would slide up and down her back as they danced, and Lisa wondered what the feasibility of simply decking him and being done with it was. "You know," she finally said, pulling back from him, fighting for air, "I'm getting kind of tired. Why don't we call it a night?" "Good idea." "You idiot," her brain yelled at her a mere 15 minutes later. "The office is not this direction." "This is kind of the long way around, don't you think?" she asked, willing herself not to lose her cool. "Relax." Tucker flashed that smile that ate away at her gut. "I thought we could have a nightcap at my place." She closed her eyes, knowing Polite was going to get her in the middle of a wrestling match she had been a participant in one too many times. "Look, I'm really tired. I need to go back and get my car." "Hard to get." He put his hand on her shoulder and dug into the hardened muscles there. "I like that." "No." She took his hand and put it back on the steering wheel. "Not hard to get. No get. Now, take me back to my car." He glanced over at her and scowled. "But it's all the way across town." "So?" "So let's just go to my place. You can crash there, and we'll get your car tomorrow." "No, Tucker, you're not hearing me. I want to go to my car. Now, either you take me there, or I'm going to get out and walk." Her gaze chanced out to the freeway speeding by her window. "Yeah, right," he said with a dismissive laugh, "like you're going to jump out going 80 on the freeway." Lisa reached for the door handle. "I'm not kidding, Tucker." He glanced over at her, and his face fell into a deeper scowl. "But I bought you dinner." "Money?" She understood his insinuation and dug into her purse. "Is that what you're worried about? Then here's 40. That should cover mine." She pushed the bills into his space as he glanced down at them without moving more than his eyes. "Put your money back. It was on me." "No," she said as her patient snapped. "On me means you don't expect anything in return. Nothing. Otherwise, it's not on you. It's on me. And that's not how this is going to go. So here, take this." She tried to stuff the bills into his jacket pocket, but he pushed her away. "We're almost there," Tucker said as his voice darkened. He pulled off the freeway and stopped at an intersection. "Just chill, okay?" But she knew all too well where chilling was going to get her. With no more than a half a second of thought, she reached for the door handle, clicked it, and swung it open as the light turned green ahead of them. "What are you doing?" he practically screamed. "What I should have done when you showed up." One hand clicked her seatbelt as her first heel hit the pavement. Horns behind them blared to life. Her body out, she slammed the door and stumbled from the middle of the road, across 3 lanes to the other side as the cars played pinball with her path. "Cripes, how do I let myself get into these messes?" Beep, honk, beep, and she made it safely to the other side of the street. Great, now what? She looked around to get her bearings, and then she realized that Tucker might actually have the audacity to come try to find her. That thought jerked her steps down the street. "I truly hate guys," she said into the night air. "I really and truly do. They are nothing but egomaniacal, selfish, inconsiderate jerks, and if I never see another one again, it will be too soon."
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.
Chapter 7. Lisa didn't bother going to work over the weekend. The possibility that Tucker would call, or worse, that he would outright show up at her door again, made her skin crawl across her veins. How many times had she been so stupid in the past? As she clicked across the zebras on the computer in her living room, she tried not to think about it. However, the thoughts were going nowhere. There was Jay in high school. He had seemed nice enough until they made it to the back row of the movies together. Then there was Martin, the only prom date she ever had, junior year. Why she had tried to look so perfect for him, she couldn't really tell now. All that had done was send an invitation that had nearly cost her more than the heel of one shoe and half of the top of her dress. Her face set in stone as she clicked across the web. In college, it was a whole string of guys, many of which she didn't even want to remember, culminating with Connor Beale. In frustration, she clicked the mouse twice and shut the computer down. Thinking was a bad idea. She needed something to do so she wouldn't think. Picking up the stereo remote, she flicked the little black box on, found a song that was actually louder than her thoughts, turned it up a notch, and then went into the kitchen where a week's worth of dirty dishes stared back at her. It was better than the alternatives. The only thing Jeff thought of all weekend was her and the possibility that when he happened by the answering machine, the light would be blinking. However, that little light wasn't cooperating. "She'll call Monday," he told himself as he crawled into bed Sunday night. "She has to get the message tomorrow." Arching an arm behind his head, he gazed up at the ceiling and let his mind float to the two of them in some distant space in the future. It was all that was keeping him sane. "Here are the weekend messages," Sherry said Monday morning, laying the small stack on top of the folders piled on Lisa's desk. She took one look at them, and dread traced through her. When Sherry was gone, Lisa reached over and flipped through them, fully intending to trash anything that had the name Tucker on it. However, before she found one so easy to discard, a name jumped out at her: Jeff. Telling herself it made no sense, she stood from her desk and strode out into the front office. "What's this one about Jeff?" "I don't know," Sherry said. "He just said Jeff, from some fire station. He didn't sound like a client, but I think he knows you." "Oh." Lisa looked down at the pink slip in her hand. "Okay, I know who it is." She closed the door softly behind her, went around to her desk, and sat down. This was insane. How much clearer message could she have gotten on Friday night? Guys were not to be trusted, ever. Closing her eyes lest her heart see what she was doing, she crunched the little paper up and sent it sailing to the trash can. It didn't quite make it, but Lisa turned back to her work. It's the thought that counts. That light was getting on his nerves. Jeff checked it twice when he got home from work on Tuesday, but still nothing. "Please, God, I'm asking you here. I just want to see her again. Please." "I want a full-blown proposal," Burke said on Wednesday when he called. There was no mention of Tucker or Friday, which Lisa was grateful for, but what she really wished was that they would just give up on this whole idea altogether and leave her alone. "If you could put a brochure together to send out to the schools, I think that would put the idea over the top with them." "A brochure, sir?" "I was thinking you could get quotes from Fletcher and Hayes and that other guy, what's his name, at the city engineering department. That would put our name out there so the school board and everybody can get behind this thing." "Oh, yeah," she said. "Great idea. I'll get to work on it right away." "Great. If you could get those out by the 1st. "The 1st? But that's only a week away." "Then I'd better let you get to work." "Yeah," she said as she hung up the phone. "You'd better." When Sherry walked past Lisa's door Friday at 1 on her way back in from lunch, Lisa's attention snapped up. "Sherry, did Hayes call back yet?" She took a bite of the sandwich lying on her desk, hoping that somehow she had simply missed the call. "Nope, nothing," Sherry called back. "And you called him?" "I've left all kinds of messages," Sherry said, appearing at the door. "Either he's not getting them, or—" "He doesn't want to talk to me," Lisa finished for her. Furiously, she wiped her hands across each other to get the crumbs off. "Okay, if that's the way he wants to play, then that's the way we'll play." A whole day of continuing education to relearn CPR after a night of little sleep due to the cornflakes scattered across his short-sheeted mattress was enough to make a minister cuss, and yet Jeff was determined not to let them get to him. They were testing him, and he was going to pass this test as surely as he had passed every other one to get to this point. However, his eyelids were betraying him the longer the nurse droned on, and when they took a 5-minute break at 4:20, he stumbled to the break room to grab a cup of coffee, hoping it would get him through the last 30 minutes awake. Cup in hand, he stepped out of the break room and very nearly ran into Lisa coming the other direction. "Oh, Lisa, hi." His heart did a somersault and 2 cartwheels as the coffee in his hand nearly jumped from the cup. "Hi," she said. Her tone was harsh and businesslike. "Is Captain Hayes here?" Yeah." He pointed up the wire mesh. "I think he's up in his office." "Great, thanks." With no more than that, she turned and her heels clicked across the concrete and up the stairs as Jeff stood, body frozen to the spot, letting his gaze follow her all the way to the door, which she opened barely a half-second after she knocked. Carefully, he bent and took another sip as his gaze traveled up the stairs completely on its own. Whatever he had done, the chief was about to regret it. Don't take this the wrong way. Without pretense, Lisa sat in the chair across from a none too pleased Captain Hayes, who had only to be on site while his troops took the latest round of classes. But just because you are a captain, that doesn't give you the right to blow me off like I don't even exist. "Ms. Matheson, I'm sure I don't know." "Messages," she said shortly. "And don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. I have called, repeatedly. I have left tons of messages, but I guess you were just too busy to pick up the phone and tell me you had no intention of helping me, so you let the answering machine do it for you. Well, I don't like being ignored, and I am not going to go away. So, you can either have the courtesy to tell me to my face to take a long leap into an empty river, or you can start treating me with a little respect." Slowly his gaze fell from hers to the desk. "I know you're trying, Ms. Matheson, but I really, really wish you would just get somebody else. Speaking is just not my expertise." "I appreciate that, sir. I really do. But I'm on a deadline here, and you're what I have to go with, whether either of us likes that or not." She shifted an inch in her chair. "Look, I am putting this brochure thing together for the schools. They may very well turn tail and run in the other direction over this thing, like everyone else has. Who knows at this point? But Burke Cordell wants this project, and I have committed to doing it. So, please, are you going to help me or not?" The captain sighed and scratched his head. "Okay, what do you need?" He really was a nice man, Lisa decided as she shut the captain's door behind her after an impromptu interview which had gleaned exactly what she needed. Nice quotes from a very knowledgeable, interesting person. The kids were going to love him if she could ever actually get him up there on stage. Clutching her black notebook to her chest, she looked down at the steps as she descended them. The fear of catching a heel on the mesh and ending up on the concrete below grabbed her gaze and held it there. However, a thought superseded even that one. She looked at her watch and thanked God above for 24-hour shifts. Although that still put him somewhere in the building, at least if she could make it to the door and out, she wouldn't have to talk to him again. At the concrete, the guys standing around the truck noticed her and half-waved, but none of them was Jeff. She should have been happy about that fact, but something in her just wouldn't let her be. The sunshine outside was definitely getting warmer. The trees were blanketed with tiny pink blossoms, and she breathed in their fragrance as she walked down the sidewalk. One part of her was absurdly sad that she hadn't gotten to see him again. But that was nuts. She should be happy. It would save her the embarrassment of feeling like a love-struck teenager again. She hated feeling like that, and she knew anyone who bothered to look could see it every time she was around him. Barely looking enough to cross the parking lot, she hurried to her car, where her key was halfway to the lock, when she first heard the voice. "Lisa!" It stopped her cold for a long split second, but somehow her brain told her if she just ignored it, it would go away. She fiddled with the keys. "Lisa, hey," Jeff said, jogging up past the other cars to hers. Casually, as if she really had just heard him, She pushed a piece of hair behind her ear, telling herself he was just any other guy. "Oh, hi there." But not one thread of her believed that lie, and with one look, the thought scattered like blossoms in the wind. Why did he have to increase her core temperature to scalding with one simple little glance? It was maddening. He glanced back at the station. We didn't get a chance to talk earlier. I was just wondering how things are going." "Well, they'd be better if I could think straight," her brain said as her gaze, trying to escape from the blue pools, focused instead on his arms. With no jacket covering them, and the t-shirt stretched across them, they were making the signals in her brain fire backward. "Oh, fine. It's fine." She tried to unlock her car again, but her hands were shaking so badly, she finally gave that up for fear he would notice. "You looked kind of upset when you came in." He leaned onto the side of her car and crossed his arms as his gaze held only on her. At this rate, she was going to suffer a complete meltdown. "I was hoping nothing was wrong." "Oh, yeah. Well, the captain. I was trying to get in touch with him, and he wasn't returning my calls, so I was kind of—" Returning calls. Something about that phrase jammed into her other thoughts as her memory snapped to a little pink piece of paper crumpled and lying by a trash can. This was a disaster. I got your message the other day." "You did?" he asked, and his arms uncrossed so his hands could find the pockets of his jeans. "Oh, I figured I must have left it on the wrong machine or something because, you never called back." Nervously, she wound the hair over her ear, willing the earth to be kind and swallow her whole. "Yeah, well, I've been kind of busy." "Yeah," he said, and with one glance she knew he had gotten the message she was sending. The ache in her heart followed his gaze down to the pavement. Then he looked up and caught her gaze in the depths of his. "Well, I'd better let you get back to work." "Yeah," she said softly, feeling the middle of her soul rip in half at the hurt in his eyes. "See ya." He turned and started across the lot as she willed herself to be strong and let him go. However, there was a little, tiny voice that said this time he wouldn't be coming back. Insanity times 2 washed over her. "Jeff," she finally called as he crossed the lot, and she wondered what in the world she was doing as her feet started after him. "Jeff, wait." Right in the middle of the driveway, he stopped, turned, and the hurt on his face smashed into her heart. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I was just wondering if you're hungry," she said, battling for words and air. "I mean, I only had half a sandwich for lunch, and I'm starving." A sad hint of that lopsided smile traced across his face. "I don't want to keep you. I know you've got things to do." "No, well, yeah, I do, but I may pass out from malnutrition if I don't get something in my stomach, and we wouldn't want that, would we?" His smile increased. "No, we wouldn't want that." However, she saw the anxiety wrap around him and lace through his eyes. "So what? There's a couple of nice places down the block." Then he looked down at his clothes, and she felt the apprehension pouring from him. "You know what I really want?" she asked, throwing propriety to the wind. "A hot dog." Disbelief jumped right through his apprehension. "A hot dog?" "With chili and cheese," she said as her voice gained momentum. He laughed. "Yeah, right." "Seriously, that's what I want." "Okay." He looked past her to the traffic beyond. "Well, there's a place we get lunch for the station sometimes, but it's like 10 blocks down, and in this traffic—" "We could walk," she said, liking that thought more than she knew she should. "Are you sure?" he asked as his dark eyebrows raised at the thought. Squaring her shoulders and her chin, she nodded. "Totally. Just point me in the right direction." She was just being nice, Jeff told himself as they stood at the 8th intersection. He should never have run after her in the parking lot. In fact, he shouldn't have waited for her in the first place. If nothing else, he should have just watched her drive away from the safety of the GTO and been done with it. However, standing next to her at the crosswalk, he had to admit he was glad he hadn't. One more moment with her was worth all the embarrassment in the world. Just before the lights changed, she looked at him, and he liked the smile in her eyes. "Race you." The walk sign flashed, and in the next heartbeat, she was gone. "Hey!" In 3 strides, he caught up with her. Heels weren't exactly the best running shoes in the world. Midway to the center, the sign flashed, "Don't walk." 8 jog strides, and they stepped up onto the next curb together. "What are you, nuts?" "Just trying to prove your theory wrong," she said with a shrug. He laughed outright. "Well, I'm thinking next time you might ought to wear better shoes." "You don't like my shoes?" She kicked her strapped heels out past the long, straight navy skirt. "Oh, no, they're fine, unless you're racing lights, in which case—" "You've got a point there," she said, and he couldn't help but think that she gave new meaning to the phrase traffic stopper. She looked over at him quizzically. "So, you're here, but you're not working. What's up with that?" "CPR classes, intensive 8-hour day on top of a 24-hour night. Fun, fun." When her worried gaze traced over him, he looked away and stifled the yawn. Sleep was now 3rd or 4th priority on the list at least. "You sure you want to be eating now? You look like you could use a nice warm bed and a soft pillow." He yawned for real then. Food first, sleep later. Not looking exactly reassured, she nodded. "So, how's work been?" "Good. We got a call on a fire the other night." "Oh," she said quietly, and he saw the smile fall. Jeff shrugged, having not realized the effect that simple admission would have on her. "But as fires go, it wasn't so bad." "That's good." They got to the next curb, and mischief danced across his tired heart. 10 to 1 we don't make it to the middle before it changes." 10 to 1? That's a sucker's bet. "Hey!" On the breath of the breeze around them, they were running across the asphalt. 2 steps beyond the middle, the "Don't Walk" sign flashed. On the other side, she reached out for his back to stop him as she gasped for breath. That touch shot through him like a rocket flash. "Okay, what do I win?" "Win?" he asked, looking back, and his heart slammed forward as her hand brushed down his back, finally landing on her knees as she gasped for breath. "You said 10 to 1 we wouldn't make it halfway, and we did." When they started back down the walk, her strides weren't nearly as focused as they had been when she'd first strode into the fire station. "So, what do I win?" He smiled. "I'll have to think about that one." "Think about it? That's not fair." But before she got that out, he banked to a door on the edge of the sidewalk and opened it. After a moment's hesitation, she crossed in front of him and into the little dimly lit cafe. He closed his eyes to memorize the soft fragrance of her as she passed him, and then he jumped back into reality to follow her in. "Here." His hand brushed across her back as he guided her to a table where he pulled her chair out with one swing. Once she was seated, he carefully sat down across from her and smiled. He couldn't help it. It was what her mere presence did for him. She tilted her head and gazed at him. "What?" "I just never pictured you to be a hot dog fan." "Why not?" Softly he laughed, wondering why his gaze seemed to lock on her so naturally. "The suits, the heels, you don't exactly look like you've spent much time in dives." "I've been in my share," she said almost defensively, but still he smiled. "What?" "Nothing," he said, and for the life of him, he couldn't get that smile off of his face. All of life could have simply stopped, and he knew he would have been perfectly happy to just sit there, looking at her forever. "So, have you heard from Dustin and Eve lately?" Lisa asked as they crossed back into the parking lot 2 hours later. "They're good," Jeff said, and even now she noticed how his hands were safely jammed into his jeans pockets. Yes, guiding her to a table, pulling out chairs, opening doors, but beyond that, he seemed wholly content to just be near her. In fact, his hands somehow looked out of place, as though they didn't really know where they were supposed to go. "I think Eve's happy to be close to her folks again." I can imagine, although I'm surprised she even notices anybody else even occupies the planet besides him. Jeff laughed. They're intense, but I guess that's what you get when you really fall for somebody. I wouldn't know, she said with a sigh, although her heart was saying much different. So you don't have some intensity in your life? At the moment? Her brain asked without her permission. No time. That's too bad, he said softly. I think everybody should have time for a little intensity now and then. She slipped up to her car door, but still wasn't ready to just get in and drive off, so she turned and leaned back onto the door. He followed her lead until they were both looking out across the parking lot, shoulder to shoulder. Once I get this dumb brochure thing done, then I'll think about having a life. Until then. His gaze fell to the asphalt and then slipped up to her face. Well, I hope Hayes will cut you some slack. What I really wish is that I could just drop the whole dumb idea off a cliff and be done with it. It's causing a lot more trouble than it was ever worth. Concern wafted over his features. What kind of trouble? She glanced over at him and tried to smile, but it had no strength behind it. Her impromptu trek through the late-night Houston streets replayed through her mind, and she closed her eyes and shook her head to block it out. I'm sure it's just me. What is? He asked, turning as he laid an elbow on the top of her car. Trying to seem like it didn't matter, she shrugged, but her hand rubbing up and down her other arm, not to mention her black notebook held up to shield her from the memories, betrayed the shrug. It's nothing. She felt his gaze narrow as outright worry crossed through his face. What's nothing? Suddenly, she was right in the middle of intensity, and she had no idea how she had gotten there. It's just Mr. Cordell's grandson. She shook her head as her gaze tried to look at him, but humiliation pulled it down to her shoes. Let's just say he doesn't take a hint very well. The worried scowl looked so out of place in his kind eyes. Did he hurt you? She wanted to laugh at the distress in his tone, but the memories scratching through her wouldn't let her. No, but not for want of trying. Concern was banking toward anger on his face. What does that mean? It means I should have figured out by now that guys are after one thing, and one thing only, no matter what other motives they seem to have to start with. The sound of her voice was bitter even to her own ears. Not all guys are like that, he said softly. Yeah, well, everyone I've ever met has been, she said, and harshness dripped off every word. Quickly, she shook her head. I've got to go. Yeah, he nodded. I shouldn't have kept you. That stopped her, and the harshness dropped away when she looked at him, righting himself from her car. I had a nice time. He tried to hold her gaze as his hands found his pockets. I did too. She opened her door as her heart begged her not to totally shut the door on him. The improbability was enough to give Einstein a headache, and yet her heart said that if she had indeed found the one nice guy left on the planet, she would be an idiot to make this the final goodbye. Call me sometime. Rational pulled her up short with a snap, but it was too late. His gaze jumped to hers in surprise. Really? Yeah, she said, and I promise I'll return it this time. With a grateful smile wafting from the depths of his eyes, Jeff nodded. I might just do that. The idea was always there, in the recesses of Jeff's mind, but every time he picked up the phone, his courage evaporated. She didn't really want him to call. Besides, she was busy with the whole conference thing, and the last thing she needed was to be wasting time talking to him. Several times during the week, her silhouette leaning against that car drifted through his mind, and every time he saw the defensiveness and the stay-in-your-space stance in her eyes. Wary, he thought Wednesday afternoon as the clock wound around to 2 o'clock. That was a good way to describe how she looked. Hey, watch the water thing! Dante yelled from the opposite side of the truck, as the memories drifting through Jeff's head took reality right along with them for a moment too long, causing the water hose in his hands to get a little wilder than he had planned. Sorry, he called over the metal. Sure you are, Dante muttered, and Jeff refocused on the task at hand. With one hand, he reached into the bucket, teeming with suds, as the other held the water hose. The silver across the front of the truck gleamed in the bright sunshine as the sponge worked its way to the other side. "Think fast," Dante called over the truck, and Jeff ducked the second he saw the shadow of the object arcing over the top of the truck. The sponge hit the bucket beyond with a splash. "Nice shot," Jeff said approvingly. "Thanks." He trained the water back to the front tire as his sponge worked across the black rubber. "Ahem," the voice said behind him, and when he turned, water from both the sponge and the hose splattered across the sidewalk. "Lisa?" he asked in surprise as he straightened. He couldn't be totally sure. Her hair cascading down in a brown fall, streaked with just a touch of lighter brown, deleted what he had previously thought of as the most gorgeous woman in the world from the disk of his mind. "I didn't... Hey, are you here to see the captain?" Her eyes danced right along with her smile as she brushed a piece of hair that blew into her face back. "Yeah, is he around?" "I think he's..." Jeff's gaze ripped from hers into the station. "Yeah, he's right in there." The water followed his attempt to point, and it splashed across the puddles on the driveway as he did. She looked down at her shoes that had been splattered by the motion. "Oh, man, I'm sorry," Jeff said as his nerves jumped to the surface. He wasn't at all sure that if he was thinking straight, he could have figured out what to do with the hose and the sponge so he could get her dry again. But one thing was for sure, straight was so far away he couldn't even see it. "It's okay," she said as she backed up. "I've been meaning to take a bath." He laughed hollowly as she glanced into the station. "I'd better go. See you when I get done?" "I'll be here," he said, and when she stepped away, his heart plummeted out in front of him. Whoa, she was the most beautiful person he had ever laid eyes on. "Heads up!" Dante yelled from the top of the truck, and before Jeff had a second to rejoin reality, he turned just as the sponge hit the bucket in front of him, sending suds in a fountain right over the top of him. "Ah, Daunt!" he yelled furiously. "Crud!" "Sorry," Dante said with a laugh. Jeff shook the suds off his arms even as he tried to wipe them off his face. "Sure you are." Then his gaze chanced into the station, and as hard as she was trying not to laugh, Lisa's whole face was lit with laughter. He shook his head at her as his own smile jumped to the surface. Smooth, real smooth. He arched his eyebrows skyward helplessly. "Oh, you're back again?" Captain Hayes said to her, and Lisa's attention snapped away from Jeff as she stepped into the space vacated by the fireman who had been talking with the captain. Their conversation faded as Lisa turned her back to the sunshine beyond the garage doors. Jeff tried to keep his mind and his attention on the water and the truck and away from her, but that was like pulling ice molecules apart. No, when she was around, his attention was fused to her, and that was just all there was to it. The captain pointed up the stairs, and Jeff watched her nod. When she turned, her gaze caught on his for one more second, and a mutual acknowledgement passed between them. She was halfway up the steps when Dante yelled, "Bombs away!" Instinctively, Jeff ducked just as another sponge hit the bucket. Life was so great. There was only one reason to come and show Hayes the completed brochure, and that reason had nothing to do with Captain Hayes or the brochure. It had only to do with the fact that her phone hadn't rung in a week. Every single time that thing so much as jingled at work, every piece of her senses jumped out to sit right next to Sherry answering it. In fact, she had taken to leaving her door open so she could better hear the calls as they came in. However, by Wednesday she could take it no more. So, first she called to confirm that the captain was actually on site, and then her feet and heart flew her over until she was sitting across from Hayes, acting like a 7th grader handing in her homework, as her mind wandered down the stairs and out to the front to the fire truck, gleaming in the sunlight. "Very nice," the captain finally said after reading over the maroon and silver plastic-coated booklet. "And this has gone out to the schools?" Yes, yesterday, sir," Lisa said, straightening. Well, I wish I could say it's horrible and it's never going to work. But if they don't go for it after this, I don't think dynamite would convince them." "Thank you, sir," she said, sincerely touched by the compliment. "You mind if I keep this one?" he asked, holding it up. "Oh, no, that would be fine." Furtively, she looked at her watch. On to plan B. Now that we've got this part taken care of, I was wondering if you knew of any other speakers who might be interested, apart from Mr. Fletcher, of course." As soon as Hayes leaned back thoughtfully, she knew it would be enough to kill a few minutes. Now, if Jeff would just hang around if Hayes got on anything resembling a roll, her plan had an actual chance of working. The trucks were back in the garage, and Jeff was busy rechecking the last of the compartments. Everything seemed to be in place. He slammed that door just as he heard the heels. He was really starting to like that sound. The smile was there before he even turned, and her gaze was on him before he had so much as said something to get her attention. "Everything cool?" he asked when she got to the third step from the bottom. "Almost," she said, looking around hesitantly. "I guess you're on all night again?" "As always." He held his hands out, palms up. "And you don't have to go get takeout?" "No, I think Hunter roped me into something last time because he knew he could." "Oh," she said slowly, seeing her plan disintegrate before her eyes. "So you're stuck here then, huh?" "Pretty much." Her gaze and his heart landed on the floor as she pulled her notebook closer to her chest. "I'm off tomorrow night, though," he said slowly, knowing that wasn't what she was after, but hoping it was all the same. "Well, after the CPR test is over at 5. The smile in her eyes flitted across the strings of his heart just as he heard the voices from down the hall. "I think you're an egg short of a basket, Hunt," Dante said in annoyance. "The whole idea was to— Oh, well, what have we here?" Instantly, Jeff's gaze toppled to his shoes as he backed away from her. "Well, well," Dante surveyed her slowly, and Jeff felt her back further away from him. "I don't think we've been formally introduced," Dante said smoothly, and Jeff's protective shields came out. However, he was at a distinct disadvantage, and he knew it. "Dante Ramirez." "Lisa Matheson." She held her hand out to him, and Jeff noted that the formal tone was back in her voice. "This is my buddy, Hunter Witkowski," Dante said. "Hunter." Lisa shook his hand as if they were about to sit down for a conference call. The smallest of awkward moments passed before Lisa smiled tightly at all of them in general. "Well, I'd better get back to work. It was nice to meet you all." "Same here," Hunter said with a small waving. And with that, she put her gaze on the concrete, turned, and walked out. Had he had the means and the method, Jeff definitely had the motive to kill Hunter and Dante. "Taylor." Hunter clapped him on the shoulder, which brought him back to reality with a crash. "Dante here just nominated you for cooking duty tonight." His heart lay shredded on the floor as he felt her spirit slip away from him. "Well, I guess I'd better get to work then." All day Thursday, Lisa batted the suggestion around in her head. Back and forth, 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Showing up without even her normal lame excuses was frightening beyond words. Yet she couldn't get the time or his eyes out of her head. By 4:30, her brain was in an all-out war with her heart. Going was certifiably insane, but not going was going to make her batty too. Finally, at 4:45, she gave up and grabbed her purse. He wouldn't be there anymore. At least then she could tell herself that it was fate that had kept them apart, and not her. "Have a good night," she said to Sherry at the door. Sherry checked her with an odd look as she glanced at her watch. "Yeah, you too." For the 100,000th time, Jeff looked at his watch as the clock wound around to 5 till 5. She wouldn't be out there. He hoped she would, but she wouldn't. 2 more pencil marks, and he called it good enough. "Time," the teacher called, and Jeff stood, wanting and yet simultaneously not wanting to get out to the parking lot. "See you Tuesday, Taylor," Hunter said with a smile that Jeff didn't like at all. "Sure, see ya." Knowing what a scene it would make if he went out to the parking lot with them, and she was waiting, he hung back, collecting his books and notebook as slowly as possible. When the room had cleared, he exhaled. She wouldn't be there. Getting his hopes up that she would was a one-way ticket to unbelievable heartache. Once in the parking lot, he surveyed the cars quickly. No little white Cavalier to be seen, and his heart plummeted. He looked at his watch. Maybe she got caught in traffic. Maybe she was running late. Crawling behind the wheel of the GTO, the list of maybes flowed through him. It was only 5 after. Even college professors got 10 minutes. "This is crazy. What the heck am I doing?" Lisa asked angrily as she turned the car into the fire station parking lot at 5:13. "He's long gone, and I should be working, not—" But that thought sliced in two when she saw the GTO still sitting at the far end of the parking lot. Panic hit her 1 second after the relief. Oh, great. Now what? The part of her that was happy about the car being there was also the part of her that started traipsing through her chest at the sight of it. Angling her car next to his, she pulled into the space, wishing she had a clue what came next. With every tick of the clock, Jeff had told himself she wasn't coming until all but one lone holdout believed it. However, the second she pulled in next to him, all of the deserters fell all over themselves, thanking the holdout for keeping them there. In one motion, he jumped from the car and ran over to hers as she stood, business mode stretched tightly across her. "You made it," he said as his hands found his pockets, lest they actually reach out and hug her like they wanted to. "I'm late," she said softly. He shrugged. No big deal. The class ran a little over anyway. For a second, he let himself notice the hair falling across the small round arch of her shoulder. It was enough to send his senses flying off the radar scope. "You hungry?" She looked up, and he was surprised that his feet didn't actually float right off the earth. "What do you have in mind?" "How about Mexican? I haven't had a good enchilada in forever." "Sounds good," she said. "I know this little place out in La Porte we could try. A friend of mine said it was pretty good." "La Porte?" he asked skeptically. "But that's like 30 miles away." "Oh, well, if you don't want to. I mean, if you're tired." "No, I just figured you'd be wanting to get back to work." "Work will still be there tomorrow," she said, and her voice faded on the words. "So you want to take your car or mine?" "Mine's cool, if that's okay with you." "Fine by me." Being with him was so easy. Alarm bells weren't ringing through her head at every move he made, and there wasn't a piece of her that thought he would so much as suggest something that made her uncomfortable. In fact, when they left the Houston traffic behind and the car picked up speed, Lisa couldn't remember ever feeling so free or so safe. She laid her head back on the headrest and drank in the day around her. If it never got any better than this, she would never complain. When they got to the restaurant, she waited for him to run around and opened her door. With him, it wasn't about who had the power, and she sensed that it never would be. In minutes, they were seated on a little patio overlooking the beautiful Gulf of Mexico. The breeze blowing in sent her hair skittering across her face, and she tossed it back with a flick of her fingers. "So, how's work?" Lisa asked after they had ordered. "It'll be better Monday." "Oh, what's Monday?" "The gods finally had mercy on me. They switched me to B shift." "And that's better?" "I was on C, but they just handed out some promotions, and now they're a couple hands short over on B, so I get the lucky draw." "So does the captain go with you?" she asked, suddenly seeing her one connection to him disintegrate. "Nope. New shift, new captain. Rainier, but he's pretty cool. I worked that fire under him that night. He seems pretty together." "And Hayes isn't?" "Oh, Hayes just has his favorites, and I don't think I'm one of them." "Why not?" "There's always a pecking order, but with Hayes, it's a little more visible than usual." "So you'll be happy with the change then?" "Yeah, I know a couple of the guys on that shift already, so it's not square one. At least I won't have Dante giving me showers on a regular basis anymore." She laughed as her gaze drifted over his face. She had kind of liked that shower. All Jeff wanted to do was make the night last forever. When he glanced over at her, relaxed in the passenger seat later, his heart pleaded with him to find a way to make that happen. "Have you ever been out to the point?" "What's that?" she asked, leaning her head to the side. "You want to find out?" "Sure." It had literally been years since Jeff had put the top down. Up until they parked on the point, he hadn't really had a good reason to, but the night was so peaceful and the stars were so bright. For this one moment, he just wanted to experience all of it. "Where are you going?" she asked when he reached for his door handle. "Sit tight." She sat up anyway as he got out and started to work first on one side and then on the other. If they were going to make this a habit, he really needed to put some oil on the latches. The second side finally broke loose, and carefully he pulled the folds of the top back. "Oh, wow," she breathed, laying back into the seat as she looked up into the velvet and diamond night above her. "It's gorgeous." He got back in, tried to lean back, but he had to rework the position of the seat before he could fully appreciate the world she was looking at. In the short distance ahead, the lap of the waves brushed onto the shore as the soft night wrapped around them. Even breathing felt more real than it ever had before. His gaze chanced over to her, and fascination coupled with awe as she lay back, looking out far beyond the boundaries of the earth. "I don't think I've ever seen them like this before," she breathed. "It's like they're right there." As if she could in fact touch them, Lisa reached a hand up. "Like Orion. See it right there?" Training his gaze to where she pointed, he edged his shoulder across the seat and rested his hand on the gear shift between them. "See, the 4 stars in a box and then the 3 together in the middle? That's Orion. Man, Haley would love this. She was always so nuts about this stuff." "You're not into stars?" "I never really thought about it. Actually, the only ones I've ever really seen were the ones in Haley's books. But this is so awesome." Slowly, her hand fell from the sky, and it landed right on top of his. An instant of hesitation, and he felt the decision run across her palm. Then she went still. "You know, I always thought the point of life was to get ahead," she said after several long minutes had slipped by. "But I'm beginning to think I was wrong." He dropped his gaze over to her, sitting there, still looking up at the stars, and her face was softer than he had ever seen it. Gently, he turned his hand over on the gear shift, and when hers came back down to meet his, the mesh was flawless. An inch at a time, he shouldered his way across the seat until the rest of her was a breath away. Does it get any better than this? I wouldn't know how. By the time they were back in the fire station parking lot, it was after 11. It was strange, because since she'd been in this parking lot the last time, life had become far simpler for Lisa. His hand, her hand, and that was it. "So, what's up for tomorrow?" he asked, looking across the seat at her. "Work," she said softly. It seemed so far away. "You?" "Sleep tonight. Work till Saturday morning. Oh joy." A pause as the night held them in its embrace. "And Saturday?" "A day off for a change. Hallelujah," he said. A day off. I don't think I even remember what that's like anymore." He laughed. "So you're not doing anything Saturday night then?" she asked. "Saturday night?" He swung his gaze to her suspiciously. "I don't know. What do you have in mind?" "Mind? Oh, nothing. I was just asking." "Oh," he said, and his spirit seemed to dip back to his side. Her brain said she must be completely nuts for even contemplating asking the question in her head. However, her heart simply wasn't listening anymore. "You ever try rock climbing?" "Rock climbing?" His eyes widened in surprise. We don't exactly live near many rocks." "No, not real rocks. The fake ones over at the rock gym." "Oh, yeah. Dustin and I went there once. It's pretty cool." "I've always thought that looked like fun. Maybe we could?" Then she glanced over at him. "But if you don't want to, we could always do something else." "No, it sounds like fun." Although he tried to hide it, she saw the yawn. "You really need to get some sleep. You're making me tired." "Yeah, that CPR stuff is more exhausting than you'd think." A moment more, and he smiled, released her hand, got out, went around, and opened her door. Something about that simple act seemed so thoughtful. She got out, and in 6 steps they were at her car. She knew the night was over. However, in all her years on Earth, she had never been with a single person she simply did not want to say goodbye to, until now. "You just want to meet over there?" he asked as she leaned on her car door. "Okay." The traffic noise descended around them. When she glanced at him, he looked more nervous than her stomach felt. "So I guess this is good night." "Yeah, guess so." A second, and then 2. She waited, but he never moved. As slowly as she could, she pulled her keys out and opened the door. If he would just reach out, stop her, pull her into his arms, she wouldn't have even protested. But he didn't. The door was open, and she looked back at him, gaze down and hands in his pockets. "Saturday? 6 or so?" With the smallest of smiles, he nodded. Gingerly, she folded herself into the seat, and he took hold of the door. "Drive careful." "You too," she said, and for one split second she thought he might lean in and kiss her. However, as quickly as that thought went through her brain, it was gone as he stepped back and shut the door. How many times had she wished the guys in her past would just leave her alone? Now that she had one that she wanted to kiss her, he just closed her door. Something about that made no sense. As she pulled into traffic, he was still standing there, watching her drive away.
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.
Chapter 8. "Have a good evening," Lisa said Saturday afternoon at 4:30 as she strode through the outer office, her hair in a ponytail and sweats gracing her frame. Sherry's face dropped in surprise. "Where are you going?" "Rock climbing," Lisa said as excitement pulled a smile to her face. "See ya." And she left her secretary open-mouthed, staring after her. By the time he yanked the electric blue pullover and black jeans on Saturday at 5, there were so many emotions swirling around in Jeff's body, brain, and heart that he couldn't catch even one of them long enough to analyze it. Excitement was there, but so was dread and fear, and the certainty that somehow he would find a way to mess this up. This wasn't really a date, he told himself. Well, it kind of was, but if he thought about the implications of that too long, he was sure his brain would completely short-circuit. Running a quick comb through his short black hair, he pulled the chain from the dresser, put it on, and looked down at the cross. "You're going to have to help me with this one, God, 'cause I have no idea what I'm doing." "Do you know how insane this is?" Lisa asked as she stood strapped to a hard nylon cable at the bottom of a jutted beige-brown structure, curving its way up a side wall that loomed 2 stories above them. That wall looked much taller than it had in the brochure she had picked up months before, and the music blaring on the speakers sounded like a nightclub gone mad. "Hey, this was your idea," Jeff said, sliding the spotter's harness around his waist. As she adjusted her own harness, Lisa's gaze snapped to the glint of the gold chain at his neck. Between that cross and the electric blue shirt curving right along with his muscles, she knew the wall was going to have a hard time holding her attention. "Well, next time, talk me out of it," she breathed, wondering what part of her said this was a good idea. One more cinch, and he grabbed the rope between them. "Okay, I'm ready." Her gaze traveled up the rock, and then she shook her head. "I'm not. Let's go home." She turned from the wall, although she was still strapped to it. However, she hadn't taken even a step when he grabbed her shoulders to stop her. "Hey, now, no chickening out." Laughing softly, he turned her back to the wall. "Now get up there." Exhaling slowly, she took a step forward, reached up for the first handhold, and laid a foot on one lower. One pull, and she was up 6 inches from the ground. That wasn't so bad. She reached for the next one and wound her foot around beneath her to find a support. Up. "Cool," he said from behind her, and she felt the slack go out of the rope. "Looking good." At that moment, it entered her mind what he was actually looking at, and still holding on, she glanced back at him. "Hey, now, keep your mind on the rocks." It was. Then he laughed. Well, mostly. She reached up, 2 more movements, and she was a full 4 feet off the ground. "Would now be a bad time to tell you I'm afraid of heights?" His laugh jumped to her ears. "I think you should have thought of that before now." The laughter faded. "Just don't look down." "Don't look down," she said to herself. "That ought to be easy enough. A hand, a foot, a hand, a foot." And she reached the first big jut. "So, how does popcorn in a movie sound?" "For tomorrow?" "No, for right now." Her body was climbing even as her mind tried to find something else to think about. "Have you ever heard the term concentration?" he asked as the slack disappeared from the rope. "You might want to try it sometime." "Have you ever heard the term scared to death?" One hand reached up to the little rock she could barely get to as her knee arched onto the jut. The only good thing was that if her own body failed her, she knew his wouldn't. The only bad thing was, what her body really wanted to do was turn around and look at his holding her there. "You're doing good. Don't stop now." "How tall do you think this thing is anyway?" "I don't know. 45 feet?" "Really?" She started to look at him, but her hand didn't quite have hold, and it slipped off, sending her crashing into the hard surface. "Ow!" "You okay?" "Crud," she said, holding on with one hand as she shook her other hand and examined her nails. "I broke a nail." "You want to come down?" She looked up and then down. Halfway. There was no halfway in her vocabulary. "No, I made it this far. I'm not quitting now." With renewed determination, she reached up and grabbed a support. "Do you have any idea how sore I'm going to be in the morning?" "A little?" "Yeah, a little," she said as her foot found another hold, and her gaze slipped up the side of the rock that now angled just enough backward to make her stomach turn. Pushing that away, she willed her arms not to fail her. 1 grab, 2. She could see the top now. It was only a few handholds up. The pull on her arm muscles was unbelievable. It felt like 5 Gs of torque stretching every fiber. "Whose dumb idea was this anyway?" she asked the ceiling above her. There was only 1 more hold to the ceiling. She could see it, but her body was already stretched to its limit. As she clung there like Spider-Man, she looked around, trying to see a way to get to that last one without having the ability to fly. Her arms were screaming at her to just go back down, but that 1 more hold taunted her. Just 1 more. "What's wrong?" he called from far below her. "I'm just not..." As she stretched for the last hold, her foot slipped away from its mooring, and her body spun away from the wall dangerously. "Ah!" A hand, a foot, and suddenly the only part of her attached to the wall was 1 hand stretched far above her. "It's okay. I've got you." The rope around her tightened as her body screamed in fright. Frantically, she lurched for the hold above her as panic shrieked that she was going to fall if she didn't get a hold of something. "Lisa, it's okay. I've got you. let go." Her heart dropped right through the center of her chest. How far had he said she was above the ground? It felt like miles. Finally, her hand found the other hold. She grabbed onto it, but when she forced her other arm to retake the other hold, tears sprang to her eyes. There was no strength left in it. "Listen to me," he called from below, concern bleeding through the words. "Just let go. I've got you. Lisa, let go." "And then what? I crashed to the ground? No way!" She reached up to grab the support again, but sharp pain screeched down her arm with the effort. How many handholds were there on the way back down? "Hello, am I going to have to come up there and get you?" he asked. "Because I will, you know." Humiliation crowded through her. If her arm just didn't hurt so badly, she could make it back to the ground on her own. "Lisa, let go." This time it was a command, not a request. Then his voice softened. "I promise I won't let you fall." Squeezing her eyes against what would happen next, she released first one foot, and then the other slipped from its hold. For one small moment, the rope jerked, and her heart jumped into her throat. But in the next heartbeat, she was floating downward as peacefully as if she was on a cloud. Small jerks, and only that as she slowly drifted to the ground. The closer her feet got, the more her shoulder hurt, and she reached up and rubbed it gingerly as tears stung her eyes. 2 seconds after her feet hit the mat, he was next to her. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," she said furiously as she beat the tears back, "but I didn't make it to the top." "Well, you got back down in one piece. That's what counts." Annoyance with herself seeped through her as she looked at him. "I think I'll just go grab something from the snack bar. You can find somebody to spot you." Her hands were working to unlock the harness at her waist and chest, but her right arm hurt every time she so much as moved it. "That's okay." With no hesitation, he reached over to help her, and in 2 clicks, she was free. "I'm not really in the mood to go up tonight anyway." But quickly, he let his own harness down to the floor. "What do you say? How does a hot dog sound?" An instant of embarrassment and reluctant gratefulness washed over her. Wonderful. Seated across from her in the little booth, Jeff looked over at her, exhausted and clearly in pain when she moved. He couldn't quite figure out why she had suggested the outing in the first place. On top of that, he wasn't at all sure he should ask. "How's the fingernail?" She pulled one hand up to display the jagged white over red index nail. "It's been better." "How's the shoulder?" Her gaze fell to the table as her opposite hand reached up for it. "Sore." The question tracked across the middle of his forehead. "You know, we could have just gone to the movies or something." "I figured you'd be bored at the movies." "Bored? I love the movies. Besides, it's better than you getting hurt." Slowly she shrugged. "I just thought this looked like fun, but I either never had time or I never had anyone to go with." He swirled the water in his glass. "Your friends didn't want to go?" "What friends?" she asked, and the admission in that question pulled her gaze down. "Your friends," he said as he leveled a questioning gaze on her. "You know, the people you hang out with?" "The people I hang out with are the 3 people who work for me, and I don't think they'd consider me a friend." "But surely you have, I don't know, college friends, high school friends, something." Back and forth her head moved, and his heart fell at the sad look on her face. "I've had a few friends here and there, but I guess I never made the time to really hang on to them. Most of them, I don't even know where they are now." "But you go out, surely." "On business," she said, and he saw the cringe. "Or with Haley once in a while, but that won't be happening much anymore." He watched as she leaned over next to the wall, her ponytail swinging gently over her shoulder. "I wanted to get ahead, so I put all my energy into making the company a success." She laughed. Bad thing is, it's still a disaster, and what do I have to show for it? If he could have put his arms around her, he would have. "Number 76, the speaker above them said, and Jeff looked up. "I'll be right back." With a swipe, he collected their food from the front counter and angled his way back over to the table where he set her hot dog and fries in front of her. "You need ketchup or mustard?" Without looking up, she nodded, and he turned back for the condiments. When he came back, he could see by her face that it was time to talk about something else. "Have you ever dropped mustard on the carpet?" She glanced up at him as if he had just dropped there from Mars. "No, seriously." He worked putting ketchup on his plate before holding up the little bag he had just opened. "You want some?" Slowly, she nodded. "I was making a sandwich at my apartment one time, and I dropped a whole jar of mustard, and now there's this horrible yellow stain right under one of the bar stools. I've tried everything, but I think that thing is part of the carpet now." "Did you try vinegar?" Lisa asked, taking one fry out of the basket. "No." "You should have just put vinegar on it and laid a towel over it." "That works?" "It's supposed to. I read that somewhere. I always thought it was a good thing to know, but I think you have to do it right away before it sets." "So it wouldn't work now?" She shrugged and winced with a movement. "You could try it. What's it going to hurt?" His glance chanced down to her uneaten food. "You not hungry?" "Oh." She looked at the hot dog with chili still lying whole in the basket. "I'm not sure how to pick it up." He thought for a second. "Sit tight." Quickly, he jumped up and went to the counter where he retrieved a small plastic fork. When he returned, he slid her basket over and cut the hot dog into 8 portions. Then he slid the basket back and laid the fork with it. "There, that ought to help." She reached in, not bothering with the fork, grabbed one small bite from the end and popped it into her mouth. "Better?" Her eyes danced with gratefulness. "Much." Later, as she lay between the cool sheets and took the heating pad off her shoulder, Lisa smiled as the memory of him waltzed through her head. He still hadn't kissed her, but in reality, he had touched her far more deeply than anyone who ever had. As she closed her eyes, the feeling of floating, supported by the anchor of him, drifted over her. It was a feeling she could get used to. Although she really wanted to just chunk work, it was piling up. So Sunday, when he called, she had to tell him no. Monday was the same story, although he was on shift anyway. By Tuesday, however, Lisa was starting to worry that he might just stop calling altogether, although she had done her level best not to give him that impression on the phone. As she sat in her office on Tuesday evening, she glanced at the clock and concern traced through her. He hadn't called, and as normal as that should have felt, it didn't feel normal at all. The questions flowed through her. Had he been called in? Was there some big fire she hadn't heard about? Hoping she would see nothing, her gaze traveled up from her paperwork and back over her shoulder to the bits of the sky she could see beyond the windows. No billows of smoke that she could see, and yet there was so much she couldn't see. "Stop thinking about that. You're going to make yourself crazy." "Lisa?" Sherry said at the door. "Yeah?" "I'm going to take off." "Okay." However, Sherry didn't move. And there's someone here to see you." Tucker. The name slammed into Lisa's consciousness on the dreamy sound of Sherry's voice. Gently, Lisa reached up and rubbed her still tender shoulder as she prayed for the strength to fight him off. Knowing that letting him into her office would be a huge mistake, she stood and righted her suit jacket as Sherry turned back for the front office. Lisa's stride held determination and dignity as she rounded the desk and followed her secretary out and into the reception area. "Sherry, did you find those—" However, the instant Lisa stepped into the outer office, the sentence stopped. There, in the middle of it, stood a dream she hadn't even allowed herself to have. Black jeans, white t-shirt, denim cover shirt, that gold cross. The beauty of the single pink rose he was holding paled in comparison to him. "Jeff." "Hi," he said, but his gaze couldn't quite hold hers. I thought I'd stop by and bring you this." Awkwardly, he held it out to her, and her left hand reached over to accept it. Thanks." The petals looked like soft velvet, and Lisa couldn't help but put it to her nose and breathe in its sweet, soft fragrance. Air flowing into her lungs felt so good that she took another long smell, and the top of her brain started swimming from all the oxygen. "I'll just," Sherry said, quietly gathering her things and pointing to the door. Lisa didn't have the presence of mind to say goodbye. Seconds flowed past each other like water over river rocks, as in Sherry's absence, the silence of the office engulfed them. Finally, Lisa's sanity cracked back into place. Come on in." "You sure?" he asked as his hands found the pockets of his jeans. "Yeah, maybe your brain will work better than mine seems to be." In an "I can't believe he's here" haze, Lisa walked back into her office, feeling his presence fill the room around her the second he stepped through that door. At first, she laid the rose on her desk, but the desk was such a mess she picked it up again and laid it on the top of the computer monitor. In rapid succession, her hands flitted over the desktop, trying to clear it off enough so she wouldn't look so chaotic, and so she could actually see him when she sat down. Suddenly, she noticed that he was still standing in front of the desk. "Oh, please, have a seat." Slowly, he slid into one of the chairs, and his gaze on her yanked up her nerves in fistfuls. "So this is where the magic happens." "Well, this is where something happens, but I'm not sure it could be called magic." In her hands was a stack of files, and she looked around for a good place to put them. Finally, in desperation, she stacked them on the floor next to the wall, careful to let her left arm do most of the moving. "I'm sorry, if I would have known you were coming—" "Hey, you don't have to clean on my account. I work in a fire station, remember?" Why that made a difference, she couldn't quite tell, but still she appreciated the effort. Seeing the utter futility of her cleaning efforts, she finally sat down and folded her hands on her desk. "So, what's up?" As if it took real effort, he shrugged as he shifted slightly in the chair. "I was just driving by, and I figured you've seen where I work, so—" She wished she'd had a week to get the office presentable. That's why she usually used the conference room for one-on-one meetings. That way nobody saw how jumbled her life really was. Her gaze chanced around the office, even now, wanting to find a way to keep him from seeing the mess. "Did you want to go get something to eat or something?" "No, I'm sorry," he started to say. "This was a bad idea. You're working. I shouldn't have come." "No!" The word jumped from her throat and her heart simultaneously. "I mean, you don't have to leave or anything. I just thought, sitting in an office all night isn't exactly the greatest date experience." "Yeah, well, we all know how wonderful the last one of those we had turned out." That lopsided smile played through her brain as, half standing, half sitting, he looked right at her. "How's your shoulder anyway?" "As long as I don't get it past there." She raised it midway to shoulder level and winced in pain. "It's great besides that." "See, maybe we'd be safer just hanging out doing—" He sat back down. "What is it you were doing again?" Stress blindsided her, and she sighed heavily. "Camden Foods. I've got to find a workable concept tonight, and nothing sounds right." Skeptically, he looked across her desk at the scattered mock-ups. "Well, what have you come up with so far?" She fingered one paper, wondering how he was suddenly sitting across from her asking to see her work. A moment of decision, and she stacked the papers together and handed them across the desk. "They're not very good." His gaze held hers for 1 second before she dropped the papers into his hands. Slowly, he pulled himself up in the chair with his elbows. Then he grew still, and her heart stopped. Trying to find something else to think about, or at least look at, she refocused her attention on her computer. being graded. She hated that. "This one's pretty good," he said after her nerves had crawled all the way outside her skin. She looked over, and her eyebrows arched in revulsion. "That one?" "Yeah, I like the fade thing on the edges." He glanced at her. "What, you don't like it?" "That's like the worst one of all of them." "Cool," he said as his eyes danced. "If that's the worst one, then there's got to be something we can use." He picked up a cotton candy pink one. "How about this?" The laugh jumped to her throat as she shook her head. "You're kidding, right?" "Not the color, but I like the line. Where Houston shops. Nice, short, catchy." "It's not too bad," she admitted with a small smile. Her hand reached over and clicked the mouse across her computer as she pulled that one back up and cut out the tag before placing it on a new sheet. "Now, I like this one, the whole display falling over on the guy. Funny." From the fringes of her eyelashes, she looked over at him, and her heart said that not one of her employees had ever put even a tenth of this much heart into any project they had ever worked on. "Here, look at this." He pulled himself forward to her desk. "You take the tag from this one, and the color off of this one, and the concept from this one." His gaze snagged on hers. "What?" Lisa couldn't have stopped the smile had she tried. "You?" "Me?" "Yes, you." Had she tried to explain it, she couldn't have, so she ducked her head. "Show me what you're thinking." 3 hours later, they had mock-ups for the billboards, the newspapers, and the store circulars. Outside, there was nothing but faded sunlight twining through the buildings beyond. Jeff watched her stand from her desk and stretch in that deep navy suit. "So, how long have you been in that chair?" he asked as she got ready to go. "How long have you been alive?" she asked, grabbing a few more things before she picked up her keys and the rose. "You really need to get out more." "Uh-huh." She followed him out and locked the door behind them. "We tried that, remember? I think I'm safer behind my desk." "Well, we don't have to go to that extreme." He waited for her to lock the hallway door. "Maybe for you, we should start with something small and safe, like flying kites." She turned a skeptical gaze on him. "Kites?" He shrugged. "So long as we anchor you to the ground, I don't think you could hurt yourself too badly." "Gee, thanks." "Then we can work our way up to, say, bowling or something." "Oh, great." Lisa pushed through the door to the stairwell and started climbing to the 3rd level. "By the way, what's up with parking on the 3rd level anyway?" he asked from behind her as they climbed. "Wouldn't it be easier to park on the floor you work on?" "Exercise," she said as she opened the door and stepped out into the parking garage. To the far right sat her car. Right next to it sat the dark muscle car with the top pulled down. "How'd you find me anyway?" "Car, building, directory, Lisa." He shrugged as his hands found his pockets. It wasn't hard. The logistics weren't bad. It was convincing his brain that this was all a good idea that had been the difficult part. "How about we go for some supper?" "Hot dogs?" she asked. "Your call." Talking with him, being with him, was so unbelievably easy. The whole "when is this going to turn into a wrestling match" thing was simply a non-issue with him. At the little cafe, he sat on one side of the booth, she on the other. No questions, no pressure. In fact, he didn't so much as even reach out to take her hand, and by the time they were speeding back through the Houston night to her car, the need to just touch him was overwhelming. So, when he laid his hand on the gear shift, hers slipped over his and caught there. She smiled over at him as the night floated past them. "You know, you're going to have to teach me to drive this thing sometime," she said, brushing a wind-kissed strand of hair from her eyes. His gaze jumped to hers in surprise. "You got a day in mind?" Friday, Saturday, Sunday? It didn't matter. To her heart, any day, any minute that she could spend with him was the only one she wanted to be living.
You don't want to miss what comes next. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.
Chapter 9. Jeans. Lisa hadn't worn a pair of them since junior year in college. That was the year the course of her life had been set in stone. Professional. It was how you dressed if you wanted anyone to take you seriously. She gazed into the mirror at the ponytail holding her hair Saturday morning. Until that moment, the one and only focus of her life had been to show the whole world that she was serious, that she was for real, that she was more than just some pretty face who had cotton candy for brains. Ponytails and jeans were for teenagers. The knock on her door jolted her from the thoughts, and she had to beat down the pounding of her heart. On legs she forced to be steady, she went to her door. However, the sight of him on the other side of that threshold sent her heart into an all-out spasm. "Hi," she said as the softness of the gray jersey shirt and the glint of the gold chain shining just beneath it at the edge of his throat stopped the breath in her chest. "Hi." His hands jammed into his pockets as his gaze fell from hers, and her brainwaves scrambled. "I think I'm a little early." "That's okay. Just let me grab my shoes." She sat down on the couch, pulling the hard denim of her jeans down when they didn't stretch with her. "So, where are we going?" "I thought we could go over to Memorial Park. It'll probably be jammed, but surely we can whittle out a few square inches." She stood, grabbed her purse, thought better of that move, and pulled money out to put in her pocket. Ready. There had always been something about flying kites that had fascinated Jeff. It had, ever since he was little, when he and Kit would finally beg enough so their mom would take them to the little park near their home. After catching a nice breeze, the triangle dragon kite sailed up, and away from him, and Jeff stepped back, watching it soar higher and higher. "Impressive," Lisa said from the blanket 10 feet away. "Yeah, I noticed you're not over here helping," he called in her direction teasingly. "Watching. That's much safer." "Oh, come on. I promise I won't let you fly away." He stepped over to her, careful to keep the kite in the air as he reached down for her hand. 1 second of hesitation, and her slim, smooth hand latched onto his. She stood, and he didn't miss the brush she did to the backside of her jeans. Gently, he pulled her farther away from the tree and out into the open field where he transferred control of the kite to her. It's not hard. However, the second she took control, her face set as if she was working on a microchemical component in a laboratory that might explode at any moment. His gaze chanced over her. "Hey, this is supposed to be fun, remember?" he asked. But with only inches separating them, even he was having trouble remembering that. "I'm not very good at fun," she said, and he noticed how her whole body set to alert at the very word. "Well, then, we need to work on that." Carefully, he reached around her, and although the curve of her arm was only a breath from his, he managed to keep just that much distance between them. "Roll some out." His hand helped hers without touching it. "Aren't you worried about highline wires?" she asked. He laughed. "Look around you. Do you see any highline wires?" She brushed the hair out of her face from the breeze. "Well, no." "Here, let's sit." He folded himself onto the grass. Her gaze jumped down to him nervously. "What?" Reaching up, he took her hand, and his brain instantly said that highline wires weren't the only electricity conductors in the area. "It's okay." He pulled her down next to him. However, she sat like a rod, and the inches she put between them felt like miles. "Here, man, you're using way too much energy." Gently he took her shoulders and pulled her back until her head was resting on the top of his thigh. "Now, relax." "Relax," she said, as though she was having to tell herself how to do that. You don't do this much, do you? What, fly kites? Not work. The middle of his chest filled as he looked down at her, the breeze blowing the loose strands of hair across her face. Softly, he reached down, caught them, and wound them back around her ear. No, she said, and her eyes turned liquid when her gaze caught his. After a moment, her gaze traveled back up to the kite. No time. There's always time for the things that are really important. She squirmed. Work is important. So is this. He leaned back onto his elbows, and the kite soaring high above them didn't seem all that different from his heart. How many nights had he wished for this very moment? And how many times had he simply decided that this was too far out of his reach to even attempt? Now, inexplicably, here he was, with her. God, he breathed to himself, if I'm dreaming, I don't ever want to wake up. Lisa really wanted to shoot whoever had come up with the concept of weekend shifts. Didn't they know how hard it was to get to this place to begin with? However, because he had to get back to be ready for work the next morning, it seemed like mere minutes that she was back at her door saying goodbye. With those hands in his pockets, Jeff said his goodbye, smiled, and turned for the stairs, taking her heart right along with him. Take care tomorrow, she called softly as the bottom of sanity dropped out from under her. He nodded, waved, and turned the corner. She didn't move as she closed her eyes. Dear God, please keep him safe. At that moment, he slapped the wall next to the staircase, and she jumped. What do you say? Monday? Your office? 5:30 or so? The smile flashed through her. I'll be waiting. So, do you want to try it? Jeff asked Monday evening when they had left North Houston in the rearview mirror. Try what? She asked fearfully. Driving. Me? Sure, why not? Lisa could think of 100,000 why nots, but before she could voice one of them, he pulled onto an exit. I don't know about this. You said you wanted to learn. The car stopped and Jeff got out to run around. After only a moment's hesitation, Lisa gingerly crawled across the gear shift and half fell into the driver's seat. The wheel seemed much bigger from this vantage point, and she laid her hands on either side of it as he got in on the passenger side and slammed the door. When her gaze slipped over to the cross at his neck, she couldn't help but think they were going to need every ounce of help it could give them. Okay, he said. First, you mash the clutch. The clutch? She asked, looking around for something that could pass as a clutch. He pointed past her. On the floorboard, the one next to the brake. Oh, carefully she put her foot on the clutch and pressed. Now you have to put it in first. In fear, she looked down at the gear shift, knowing this was a terrible idea. It's easy. First, his hand moved the gear shift slightly. Second, third, fourth. Memorizing even as half of her brain made a point of telling her how strong his hand looked, she nodded. Got it. Good. Now, mash the clutch. She did. Put it in first. Now, let go of the clutch, gently. The car jerked forward with a lurch. Gas. And they were left sitting in silence. What happened? Too much gas. Hit the clutch, try it again. She gripped the steering wheel and pressed the clutch as he put the car back in neutral and restarted it. Put it in first and give it a little gas. All the rest of the world dropped away from her consciousness as she worked to coordinate her body in time with the car. It lurched forward but kept rolling this time. She looked down at the foot pedals in fright. Ah! It's okay. Just get a little speed up. Now mash the clutch and shift. Oh, yeah, no problem there. Determination fell over her as she gripped the gear shift in a stranglehold. Mash the... which way is second? Down. A small click, and she was in second. Slowly, they drove to the stop sign. Now you have to go backward through the gears, clutch, and back down. Somehow, she got all of that done and got the car stopped, too, but she had no idea how. I think that's a long enough lesson. Come on, you're getting it. One more time, just to the next on-ramp. In frustration, she exhaled. Okay, clutch, shift, let out the clutch, gas. They rolled through the intersection. Clutch, shift, let out the clutch, gas. The car picked up speed. You've got it. Don't throw a party yet, she warned, yanking all of her attention to her. She had been driving for more than a decade, and yet this was nothing like any driving she had ever done. Let's go to third. Lisa pursed her lips together. Clutch, shift, let go, gas. Her whole body breathed in relief. See, it's not so hard, he said, and his hand dropped on top of hers on the gear shift. Suddenly, there weren't enough brain waves left for everything. Minutes had never flown by so fast. Where they had all gone, Jeff couldn't quite figure out, because in what felt like a blink, he was standing on her apartment threshold saying goodnight. This was the part of the date he hated the most. Awkward uncertainty leaped through his chest like an out-of-control circus. If his body would just take a rest for a minute, walking away would be so much easier, but it was locked on telling him what an idiot he was for not kissing her already. After all, how long had they known each other? Kissing her should have been a no-brainer by this point, as easy as taking a breath. And yet every time they got to this moment, alarms started ringing through his head, simultaneously telling him to just go for it, and telling him if he messed this up, he'd never get a second chance. Well, I'd better go, he said, backing away from her as his hands slipped into his pockets. All-nighters on top of 24s isn't the best way to make a good first impression. The sight of her leaning against the doorpost threatened to pitch him down the stairs. He had to keep talking, or he might actually do what his heart was begging him to do. How about Wednesday night at your office? Or we could meet over here, she said, and the softness in her eyes wasn't making leaving one bit easier. If you want. 6? Sounds good. He stepped over to the stairs. Take care. "'Kay, you too," she said as hazy dreaminess fell across her eyes. With a nod, he started down the stairs, but the need for just one more glimpse brought him back to the top, where he slapped the side of the wall and ducked back around. The sight of her slammed into him, and for a moment he forgot what his excuse for coming back was going to be. "You need me to bring something?" She smiled. "Yourself." "Myself," he nodded. "I can do that." The stairs were merely a formality as he floated down them and back out to the street, to the car. All night she was with him, in every dream, in every thought, so that by the next morning when Jeff pulled into the station parking lot, he was surprised that her car wasn't actually sitting there. However, when he parked, the fact that no one was leaving crashed him back to reality, and with one motion, he locked the car and ran to the station door. The trucks were gone. In a blink, she was gone, not because he wanted her to be, but because, to get back to her in one piece, he needed every resource he had available. Yanking one set of clothes off and the other set on, he pulled the chain from around his neck and threw it into the locker. "It's a wreck." Gabe strode through the locker room in full gear. "Pile up on the southwest. Sounds like a mess. You ready?" Grabbing his helmet, Jeff stood, ready. Chaos flashed over chaos as they snaked their way up to the scene. People were everywhere, some obviously hurt, some simply trying to do whatever they could to help. The police directed their little truck to the smattering of emergency vehicles surrounding the twisted multicolored metal that had once been cars and trucks. "We've got more Jaws coming," Captain Hayes said as Jeff's small company ran up. "What's going on?" Gabe asked for the group. "We've got people trapped all over in that pile," Hayes said, and Jeff looked over to the area where workers were swarming like bees. "There are probably some we haven't even gotten to yet. That gas truck is leaking all over everything, and the whole thing's a tinderbox that could go up any second. They're trying to spray it down, but..." "What can we do?" Chief Hayes eyed them. "I need you guys to make sure everyone's out from the last car forward." "Got it," Gabe said with a nod, and they turned and ran for the back of the line of smashed and twisted vehicles. How many there were was impossible to know. "I'll get this one." "Is everybody out?" Jeff asked, swinging the first door open. The acrid smell of the used airbag slid into his nostrils. Nobody. He ran past the one Gabe was working on and yanked on another door, knowing the next ones were going to get progressively harder to open. "Anybody in here?" Over and over again, down the line he went, and then the doors would no longer open as the cars became pancaked together. "Gabe, there's somebody in this one," Jeff called as he yanked on the door that didn't budge. "Get the hammer. Are you okay in there?" Carefully, he knocked on the spidered glass. Movement. "Hang on, we'll get you out." "Gabe, hurry up!" Gabe ran up with the hammer. "Careful." A crack, two, and the glass gave way. Gabe yanked it back out and away from the driver. When there was a clear shot into the car, Jeff looked through the shards to the middle-aged woman still strapped to the seat. Blood streamed down the side of her face, and her moans wrenched across Jeff's heart. "Hang on, okay? We'll get you out." Furiously, he scraped the forearm of his coat across the window ledge to dislodge the glass. He reached across her and unsnapped the seatbelt. "We're going to have to pull her out." Wails pierced the air coming from every direction imaginable. "That steering wheel's going to be a problem," Gabe said with a shake of his head. "It's too close. We're going to have to wait for a ram." A moan, and Jeff knew they didn't have time to wait. "Give me the hammer." With concern, Gabe handed it over, and Jeff vaulted over the crumpled hood of the car to the other side. Trying to put enough force into his swing to get in quickly, and yet not enough to go all the way through to her, he whacked at the passenger's window. However, when the glass gave way, he knew that he and his gear would never make it into that car as one. Quickly, he shed the coat and wound his way through the window, carefully brushing the glass away as he did. "I'll see if I can get her far enough out," he called, "so you can pull her out." "I'm telling you, you might as well wait for the ram," Gabe said. Gabe was right. The steering wheel smacked Jeff on the head on his way down past the dashboard for her feet. "Ow, crud." Undaunted, he slid one hand down into the shallow space at the floorboard and wrapped it around her ankle. A tug, and her ankle slid from its perch. One more. The second one, with only a bit more work, wedged out of the tiny space. "Okay, Gabe, she's free. Grab her shoulders. Count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The woman's body slid up through the opening, and suddenly Jeff was the only passenger in the car. Moving like lightning, he extricated himself, yanked on his coat, and glanced through the early morning light where he caught sight of AJ running up with his kit to Gabe's side. There were more to get out, and she was in good hands, so Jeff ran for the next car that didn't have people swarming it. "Hey, anybody in there?" A gash in the passenger's side window afforded him a view into the confines of the interior, and opposite it lay the body of a man, arched over the steering wheel. His glazed, dead eyes stared at Jeff blankly. With a gasp, Jeff pulled back in hideous revulsion, closed his eyes, and said a quick prayer. "God, take his soul to you." "I can still hear her, but she's panicking," someone closer to the front called. Jeff's steps carried him past 3 vehicles that were so mangled, telling what they had been half an hour before was all but pointless. "You've got somebody?" "Yeah," the firefighter who Jeff only then recognized as Hunter said. "But she's so far down there, the fumes are going to kill her before we can get her out." "Can we get her some air?" "It's too tight. I can't get to her." "Do we have some air?" Jeff asked again. "Yeah." Dante raced up with a bottle and a mask. "But I don't think—" It was too late. Jeff already had the bottle and the mask in hand. "How long till more Jaws get here?" They're on their way, Hunter said, pushing back from the wreck. The hard asphalt met his knees as Jeff dropped to the ground next to the garbled steel of the car that had somehow gone head over heels in the melee. What's her name? I don't know, Hunter said. More questions of Hunter would have to wait. Hey, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
2 choked coughs.
Help me, please.
Through the coughing, he heard the panic and the tears. Okay, I'm going to. What's your name? Jeff's hands went to work unwinding the hose from the bottle. Another cough.
Reagan Cooper.
Okay, Reagan. Can you see any light from where you are?
Yeah, a little.
More coughing, and he heard the sniffling too. Where?
To my left.
Great. Good. You're doing great. Her voice floated out to him, sounding hollow and weak.
Something's on my shoulder. I can feel it.
Okay, we'll have to deal with that in a minute. For right now, I'm going to pass this little mask through the hole. Can you still see light?
Yeah, no, yeah, but not where it was.
Good. I'm going to work this thing into you. Tell me when you get it, okay? He laid down on the blacktop and wedged himself into the small angle of sheared metal.
It's so dark in here, I can't feel my leg.
1 step at a time, Reagan. Stay with me, girl. Can you see the hose?
Everything's just so dark.
Dear God, please, Jeff breathed, pushing his arm as far into the hole as it could possibly go. The fumes of the ruptured gasoline tanks threatened to take his own oxygen, but he fought off that thought.
Here it is.
Thank you, God. Good. Now, put the mask on, and we'll give you some air. He motioned for Dante to turn on the air. You getting anything? Soft words, but he couldn't make them out. Reagan?
I can feel the blood,
she said, and the panic had returned, although the haze surrounding the voice nearly melted it out. They're here, Dante said, and Jeff looked back as 3 more fire trucks made it to the scene. Thank God. Hang on, Reagan, we'll have you out of there.
What's your name?
The soft voice drifted out to him. Jeff. Silence, and then a small gasp.
Jeff, can you tell my parents, Jim and Mary Cooper, can you tell them that I love them?
Reagan, now you listen to me. You hang on, girl. The guys are here to get you out.
Tell them for me, okay?
Don't give up on me now. They're here. They're right here.
Please, Jeff, please, tell them for me.
He breathed, feeling the very life in that car slip away. Yeah, okay. I'll tell them.
Promise?
I promise. Jeff, Dante said, laying a hand on his shoulder. You're going to have to move, a firefighter said as he and a partner came up with a cutter. You're going to have to move. How, he didn't know, but Jeff stood and backed away. They were too late. Reagan was already gone. Ramirez! Taylor! We need you over here! This fuel's got trouble written all over it! With one glance at the small opening he had just vacated, Jeff turned. Coming. Exhaustion, emotional, physical, mental, crowded over him as he sat on the little bench in the locker room so many hours later, he couldn't count them all. He was vaguely sure that 5 o'clock rush hour would soon take over the scene they had worked all day, but even that was just a hazy thought mixed with all the others. Slowly, he pulled the chain out of the locker and looked at it. Good job out there, Gabe said as he stopped at his locker next to Jeff's. Yeah. Needing something, Jeff yanked the chain over his head and let out a long breath. I kind of lost you after we pulled that one out. Knowingly, Gabe sat down next to Jeff. You go help up front? Jeff nodded. Yeah, we weren't so lucky up there. Slowly, Gabe's head moved up and down. That's the breaks of this job. You aren't going to get them all out. Breathing hurt. Living hurt. Does it ever get any easier? Wish I could tell you it does, but I've been doing this for almost 8 years, and every time you lose somebody, it's like ripping your heart out and stomping all over it. Great, something to look forward to. Gabe smiled softly. Hang on to the ones you get out. They are what makes this worth it. Think I'm going to head up and catch a few winks, unless somebody needs something else. Gabe smiled sympathetically. Go on, get some rest. The next morning, when Jeff stepped out into the sunshine, the sirens were still blaring through his brain. The newness of the morning permeated every piece of air so that it felt soft as it brushed past him. He got in his car and gripped the wheel. How much time had Reagan had to react? A blink? Less? Those thoughts dogged every step he had taken since he'd walked away from that car, and still they hounded him. He reached down and started the car, trying not to think, trying not to replay the sound of her soft voice and the sight of the horrible bloody mess they had finally pulled out of that wreck. He was sure she was beautiful, a carefree college student on her way to morning class. His car picked up speed as he merged onto the freeway. The tears blurred the cars around him. If they just could have gotten to her sooner, if somehow he could have gotten in there to stop the bleeding, then maybe things would have been different. Then maybe... Hard, his hand hit the steering wheel. I needed your help, God. Cripes. Reagan needed you. Where were you? Huh? Where?
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.
Chapter 10. All day Wednesday, Jeff tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, the scene was right there. Finally, at 3 in the afternoon, he got up, got dressed, grabbed a phone book, and went out to his car. He had made a promise, and if nothing else, he kept the promises he had any control over keeping. Knowing that his eyes were a mix of sadness and exhaustion, he put on his sunglasses in defense against the sun. He drove, the address imprinted on his heart. Just before he reached the neighborhood turn, he saw the little flower shop, and his hands said they would really like to have something to hold when he got there. After the short stop, he turned the GTO onto the little street and around several turns. When the car rounded the last turn, he knew exactly which house it was, the one with a myriad of cars parked out front. His promise pulled him forward as he parked and walked up to the door. If it could have been any other way... The front door opened, and suddenly Jeff had no idea what he was supposed to say to the lady standing there. Hi, I'm Jeff Taylor. I'm with the fire department. His hand swiped off the sunglasses. I just wanted to come by and give my condolences. The skepticism in the lady's tear-stained eyes gave way to gratefulness. She pushed the door wider. Please, come on in. As they crossed into the living room, Jeff had no doubt which one was Reagan's mother. She sat in one corner, surrounded by people, and yet not at all in reality. Mary, the lady said, leading Jeff over. This young man is from the fire department. With grief-stricken eyes, the lady in the chair, looking far older than he knew she was, looked up at him, and the words in his head evaporated. Ma'am, he said slowly, willing himself to find the words he did not want to deliver, and then he held the small white rose out to her. I wanted to come by and tell you about your daughter. Carefully, he sat on the footstool in front of her because his legs felt like they might give way at any moment. I got to talk to her right before... Pain surged through him, but he pushed that down. Reagan wanted me to tell you that she loved you and her dad. His gaze dropped from the woman's face as the knowledge of how completely insignificant this was now crashed over him. I'm very sorry for your loss, but I thought you should know she was thinking of you. Tears, gallons of them, buckets of them, lined up at the back of his head, But he was a firefighter, and he was on a mission. Tears had no place here.
You talked to my Reagan?
The lady asked weakly. Yes, ma'am, I did. She was very brave.
And she said she loved me?
Yes, ma'am, she did. The hand reached from the center of her chair to grip his.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Jeff didn't want to be thanked. No, he wanted to give back every thanks in the whole world so that mother could have her daughter back. Grief poured over him as he drove to Lisa's without even bothering to think about where he was going. She didn't want to see him like this, he was sure of that. But he needed somebody to hold on to for fear that he would fall right into the pit that threatened to suck him into it once again. At her apartment, he realized he was almost 45 minutes early, so rather than go up and wait in a dark hallway, he sat down by the little tree in the courtyard directly below her apartment. Worn out, he leaned back onto the tiny circle of the trunk, closed his eyes, and relaxed. Somehow, he had always focused on those he could get out, those he could save. Somehow, those he wouldn't had never really entered his mind. Standing up and going forward after losing one would take more strength than simply carrying 100 pounds of gear. This strength required far more, and he wondered if he had what it would take. What, are you holding up trees now too? Her voice cut through the still air around him, and as Jeff looked up into her angelic face, his heart turned over. The smile fell from her face. What's wrong? Awkwardly, he stumbled to his feet. You're early. Yeah, and you look like you just got hit by a truck. It was supposed to be a joke, but it ran right over his spirit. His gaze dropped to the grass. Can we talk upstairs? Worry slipped over her features. Yeah. All of her thoughts for a wonderful, romantic meal went right out of Lisa's head the second she saw him. So when they got into her apartment, she threw a handful of spaghetti in some water and dumped a jar of sauce into another pan. Then she went into the living room where he sat, head down on the couch, and carefully she folded herself next to him. The wreck? He nodded. Oh, Lord, help. What do I do now? It was bad. Even slower, he nodded. When he looked at her, the anguish in his eyes cut her to the core. Softly, she reached over and put both arms around him as he collapsed into her. The whole evening he was so quiet, a few words, a small smile, but the melancholy followed him with every step he took. At the door, later, Lisa noticed how his hands didn't even have the energy to get to his pockets. Gently, her hand bridged the gap between them and took his. You going to be okay? He tried to smile, but the liquid in his eyes gave him away. Yeah. Slowly, she laid her head on the doorpost, knowing if she didn't know he had made it home, she would never sleep. Call me when you get home, okay? Call? So I know you made it. A half-inch at a time he nodded, and then he turned and ambled to the steps. Down, down, and she could see him no longer. She waited, but no hand slapped the wall, and after several long moments, she heard the door at the bottom snap open. Her head fell forward. If she only knew what to say to take the sadness away. Without turning any lights on in the apartment, Jeff threw his keys onto the table and collapsed in a heap on the couch. His hands swiped over his face, and he sniffed. Call her. Her. The tether keeping him from falling right through the void in his heart. He reached over, picked up the phone, and dialed. Hello? The middle of his heart bounced softly. I made it. Good. You going to be able to sleep? I think so. Well, if it gets to be 4 and you need someone to talk to, you know how to reach me. His chest filled with the invitation. I may have to keep that in mind. It wasn't 4 in the morning, it was 3 the next afternoon, when exercising and watching television had used up their ability to keep his mind occupied. He really needed to talk to somebody, but she was working, and although she was great about him showing up to help, he knew he couldn't make a habit out of it. So instead, he picked up the phone and called the other name on his short list. Knox residence. Dustin, man, how's it going? Jeffrey, hey, just the man I was going to call later. Uh-oh. No, this is good. Bigger uh-oh. Listen, the station softball team's playing this weekend, and we've got people dropping out like flies. What did you do to them? Me? Jeffrey, I am hurt. Sure you are. We need a left fielder for Saturday, noon. You up for it? He needed something. Sure. Jeff hadn't bothered to tell Dustin he would be bringing a friend. The questions that would raise sent the hairs on the back of his neck reaching for the stratosphere. No, a better idea would be to just show up with her. Dustin would be smart enough to keep his comments to a minimum while Lisa was around. Of that much, Jeff was sure. Asking her wasn't all that difficult, even calling her was getting easier, and when he picked her up, the feeling of the world being right again descended on him. In fact, it wasn't until they pulled into the little softball field lot that he really started to get nervous. He parked, hoping Dustin would be too busy to notice they had arrived until Lisa was safely in the stands. Jeffrey! The voice called from behind him as they stood at the car's trunk, pulling out the little cooler, Jeff's equipment, and the sunscreen. In the next heartbeat, Dustin was there, hand raised in greeting. Jeff reached up and slapped the hand. Cool, I was wondering if you got lost, my wonderful directions and all. It was then that Dustin stopped in mini reunion. With one hand at her eyes to block the sun, Lisa smiled up at him. Well, now, Mr. Taylor, I wasn't aware you were bringing the cheerleaders. Jeff wanted to deck him. If Dustin said something to mess this up. It's Lisa, right? Dustin asked, extending a hand and a smile. Yeah, she shook his hand. I thought you might be able to use an extra fan. Always room in our stands for a fan like you. Together, the three of them walked over to the bleachers. Lisa slid her stuff up onto the fourth one up, and when she stepped up to the first riser, Jeff took her hand and helped her the rest of the way up. You going to be okay here? I'm great, she said, sitting down with her hands in her lap, smiling. Eve should be here before long, Dustin said. She can keep you company. Knox, hey, you gonna warm up or what? One of the players called from the fence. You ready? Dustin asked Jeff. Yeah, I'll be there. Thankfully, Dustin took the hint and faded from the conversation over to the dugout. You sure this is cool? Jeff asked, realizing she was going to be sitting in a whole bleacher full of people that she didn't know. I'm fine. Go have fun. And he didn't miss the way she said that word. Bases, innings, bats, balls. Lisa wasn't much of a sports fan and even less of a baseball fan, so she listened to the fans behind her and cheered when they cheered. When the guys took the field, position by position, she surveyed them until she finally picked Jeff out in the far open grassy area, straight ahead of her. Let's go, fire department, she yelled, mimicking her fellow fans, and she clapped for emphasis. Strike him out, whatever that meant. A pitch and everybody cheered. She clapped, having no idea why. It didn't matter. She was too enthralled with a guy standing out in the middle of nowhere waiting, just in case the ball happened to come his way. He looked happier today. At least the light was back in his eyes. A crack and the ball sailed out right to him. She stood, following the ball in its arc and right into his glove. Yeah! He had such good hands. Down 5-4 in the top of the last inning, Jeff grabbed a bat and swung it over his shoulders to loosen them up. Come on, Dustin. Just a hit, man. That's all we need. At the plate, Dustin set his stance and waited for the pitch. Over the plate and right into the catcher's glove the pitch sailed. "Strike!" the ump called, and the fans behind Jeff groaned. That's okay. Shake it off. Now you know where he throws." Another pitch, in the air, and it dropped right past Dustin's bat. Instantly, Jeff saw the frustration crawl across Dustin's face. "Hey, man, no big deal. All you need is one." For a second, Jeff looked across the field at his lone cheerleader, and his heart jumped. Just one. With a breath, Dustin refocused on the pitcher, and the next pitch connected with the center of his bat. Yes! Before the center fielder even got to the ball, Dustin was around first. However, the guy's arm was amazing, and Dustin had to pull up on second. "That's what we needed," Jeff said with a nod. Then he put on his game face, hit each of his shoes with a bat, and stepped to the plate. "Hey, it's Lisa, isn't it?" The lovely lady with the olive-toned skin and wavy black hair that streamed halfway down her back said at Lisa's knee, as Lisa clapped for Dustin's hit. "Hey, Eve, you missed it. Dustin just sailed one." Eve ducked under the railing and climbed up into the stands without bothering with the steps. "Jeff's up," Lisa said, clapping. "Come on, Jeff, you can do this." The ball went up and down across the plate. "Strike!" "It's okay," she said, clapping again. "It's okay." Softly, he hit the bat twice on home plate, swung it once slowly, and looked out to the pitcher. Every piece of attention that was hers was focused solely on him, on his bat, on his hands, on his arms. Focused so it was she who saw the ball arch toward him. Focused so that, like watching a dancer in perfect time, she saw the bat swing around his body and meet the ball coming the other way with a solid crack. Yes! She was on her feet, following as the ball sailed over the outfielders who were all running for it, following even as it dropped right over the ad on the right field fence. The crowd around her screamed in delight, jumping and celebrating even as she did her own little celebration dance. Yes! Go, Jeff! Woohoo! Yes! As he rounded third base on the way to home plate where Dustin stood waiting for him, Lisa thought she saw him glance up into the stands at her, and she raised both hands in the air to make sure he saw her applauding. At the plate, he simply stepped on home and caught both of Dustin's raised hands in the air. Together they swung down and clapped at the bottom of the arc. Happiness for him scattered through her. What he really needed now was his friends, and a reason to celebrate. She was glad he had Dustin, someone who understood. His statement about taking the time for the really important things drifted through her, and when he turned for the dugout and his gaze caught hers, she had the impression that she had never occupied a moment that was more important than that very one. After a few more moments, the celebration died down and play resumed. "Man, it's a good thing I decided to come on over," Eve said, sitting down next to Lisa. "That was some hit." "No kidding." The next batter took up his position. "So, I guess this means Jeff finally got up the nerve to make that phone call," Eve said with a sly smile as she looked over at Lisa. Lisa's eyebrows arched questioningly. Eve shook her long locks as she leaned back on the bench behind her with her elbows. "Jeff's such a great guy, but he's so dang shy, nobody knows he's around half the time." "So, you've known him a while then?" Lisa asked, treading through the conversation carefully. "Almost a year." Slowly Eve shook her head. "And 6 words is still a stretch." She laughed. "We tried to set him up once, double date with us and Dustin's cousin. Boy, was that a disaster." "Why? What was so bad about it?" Eve laughed as though the question itself was funny. "I don't think he got a full sentence out that entire night. And he was so jumpy. I was afraid he might actually have a heart attack on us right there. Dustin tried. Man, did he try, but there was no salvaging that wreck. It's just so weird, because when Jeff's with just us, he's shy, but he's not that shy. I mean, he'll actually laugh and joke around a little, but bring a girl around? Oh, disaster city. Protectiveness for him slipped into Lisa's heart as she looked out to the field where they were retaking their positions. So he was quiet. That wasn't such a bad thing. In fact, she could think of things far worse. I thought Dustin was going to have to come find you himself, Eve said softly, and Lisa's heart jumped as she looked over into the beautiful almond eyes. They talked about me? Of course they talked about you, Eve laughed as she sat forward. Dustin thought Jeff should go knocking on all the office doors in your building to find you. But Jeff, well, let's just say I'm glad whatever he did worked. Yeah, Lisa thought as she gazed out into left field. It had definitely worked. The players for the second game of the day were on the field warming up as the four of them stood at the fence talking. It was then that Lisa really realized how Jeff naturally stayed a foot away from her. She had noticed it before, but now there was some semblance of a reason behind it. More than that, she now knew it wasn't her he was staying away from. The hesitancy, the tentativeness in his stance and in his eyes weren't her doing. It wasn't her so much as the whole idea of her. Standing there, it was clear how ill at ease he was with the whole situation. The more she watched him, how far they had come together slipped through her. If what Eve said was true, then Lisa knew she was privileged beyond measure by the risks he had taken to get even this far, and that understanding pulled her that much closer to him. You can't leave already, Dustin said in dismay when Jeff looked at his watch and said they should probably be getting back. How about we watch this next one? At least a couple of innings. Of course, it won't be as good as ours, but... Hey, Mr. Wonderful, Eve said in her normal position right in the crook of Dustin's arm. You might want to remember who the real hero of that game was. Nice hit, Jeff. Instantly, Jeff's gaze dropped to his shoes, and Lisa could see the reluctance flash through him like a laser beam. Slowly, she reached over to him and put a hand on his back. That was some hit, she said, and his gaze jumped to hers in surprise. The tenderness in her heart transferred to her smile, then through her smile to his eyes, and then into his smile. I think it had something to do with the cheerleaders, he said as their gazes locked. The world jerked to a halt, and suddenly she wanted nothing more than for him to kiss her. A breath, and she had to shake out of that crazy idea. You know, they might make us play this next one too if we keep standing here, Dustin said as two team members crossed past them to the gate. Let's go grab some seats. When they turned for the bleachers, Lisa didn't wait for Jeff to take her hand. Hers simply slid down his rock-hard arm and twisted into the crooks at the bottom. His fingers entwined in hers as if they were made to fit that way, and had she tried to keep it from her heart, the smile would have come anyway. I got moved to B shift 1st of May, Jeff said as he and Dustin sat behind the girls in the stands. He was fighting not to notice how Lisa's hair kept brushing across his knees with every gust of wind. He liked her hair down, and he really liked those jeans. She just looked so much more relaxed and happy. They switched you already? Dustin asked, raking his fingers through Eve's hair casually. That's a pain and a half. Yeah, well, they had a whole shuffle at the top, so the bottom got reshuffled too. Wanting only to get closer to her, Jeff rested his elbow on the knee that was right next to Lisa's shoulder. After a moment, all his hand wanted to do was touch the glinting strands flickering across his sweatpants. Gently, he laid his hand down on his knee and twirled one strand of her hair across his knuckle. Strange what that did to the insides of him. Isn't it a pain, Lise? Eve asked, leaning back into Dustin's knees, having him gone all the time? However, when Lisa looked up at him, softness was all he saw. I work all the time anyway, so it's not that big a deal. Dustin tilted his head to look at her. You're not working today? Yeah, well, she said as she smiled up at Jeff. Sometimes you have to make time for the really important things. Had they been anywhere else, all the nervousness about kissing her would have made no difference whatsoever. Unfortunately, they were in the middle of a ballpark full of people, and that wasn't the most romantic place in the world to kiss somebody for the first time. The breeze picked that moment to whisk her hair across her face, and softly his fingers traced across her forehead to corral it. Gently he tucked it over her ear. Gazing into her eyes, he knew she was thinking the same thing that was screaming through his soul. Slowly, she leaned back against his knee. At that moment, the stands around them erupted into cheers, but all the noise in the world didn't have a chance of breaking through the spell that had snatched them from reality. Without warning, she reached up and wound her hand over his. That touch, that hand. Never had he felt anything like it. He knew she didn't want to be watching a game, but if they didn't want to end up under the bleachers in the next 5 seconds, the moment had to be broken. Mischievousness spread through him as he leaned down to her ear. "You're not watching the game." A laugh jumped right onto her face as she gazed up at him. "You're not either." His laugh matched hers even as his gaze reluctantly traced back out to the field. She turned back out to the field as well, but her body never really left his knee or his hand behind. When his glance chanced over to Dustin minutes later, there was a smile on his friend's face that he had never seen before. He had to admit, Dustin was right. This was more than worth it.
Never miss a second of the story. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel today.
This has been To Protect and Serve, Volume 1 of the Courage series. Written by Staci Stallings, narrated by Becky Dowdy. Copyright 2012 by Staci Stallings. Production copyright 2014 by Staci Stallings. This has been a Braveheart Audiobooks production.
You don't want to miss what comes next. Like and subscribe to the Staci Stallings YouTube channel so you never miss a second of the story.